My name's Robin. I'm an addict.
Hi, Robin.
And no, I'm pleased and proud and feel privileged to be asked to speak. And it's very significant to me to be speaking on a tape that might find its way into, particularly into a prison. Because I've recently had reason to feel grateful for having found this program of Narcotics Anonymous that has changed my life so much that today I feel confident that I will not go back to prison where I have been. I was in prison, I didn't change, I came out and led the same lifestyle for a long time afterwards that had every chance in the world of putting me back in there. Because prison doesn't change you, not for the better. And when I was in prison, I made some good friends with some good people that were kind, honest within the code of the lifestyle they led, hard-working at the lifestyle they led, nice people I care for very much. And I think everybody that I was friends with in prison has gone back to prison again. Because if you don't change, it catches up with you sooner or later. And I very recently, one of my very dear friends had just had a spectacular downfall. And it looks like he will spend the rest of his life without any chance of parole at all. He'll spend all his life until he dies and is taken out in a coffin. He will be in a prison. And I know him, and I know his wife, and I know his little boy, and I know his little girl. And I have the privilege to sit here and be able to talk about this program that I was privileged and lucky enough to find and to cling on to and to enter into this program to change my life. I don't know why I am lucky and not all those other people that are now locked up in some stinking, damned cell. It's not. There's so much in the world that is good. And why do we keep on doing the things that do us harm? We can see they do us harm. We know we're not happy when we do a lot of the things we did. Let me make that more specific. I did wretched things. I'm an addict. 17 years. I used pretty well on a daily basis. If I stopped, sometimes in that 17 years, it was with enormous effort, incredible effort, like changing the country, joining a religious cult or something for some little period. These things I would do, and I would manage to stop using substances, drugs, alcohol, drugs and alcohol, any combination of different things. I could manage to stop for a very short time. I doubt I think maybe one time I had 3 months in a row, clean and sober. And that time I literally went off and hid on a bloody tropical island. And by doing that, I managed to get 3 months clean. And the day I left, I was stoned out of my mind again. Because I'm an addict. This is a disease, just like cancer, something like that, that keeps us acting in the same behavior patterns, reaching for the substance, stocking up, having a stash, having a pile of bottles, whatever it is. And I had that disease, and I didn't know why I kept doing this. It is so weird, because it's very clear this. If the drugs and alcohol made me happy, I would be out there using drugs and alcohol today. They did not. Not at all. I was nervous, I was paranoid, I felt guilty, because I always reckoned there had to be more to life than just making a fool out of myself, or that I numbed my senses or got myself sloppy drunk or so spaced out I couldn't tell what was really going on. I reckoned there had to be more to life than this. And why was I doing this? I couldn't figure it out, you know. And when I finally, somebody got me to go to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and they said, this is an illness, this is a disease. I was relieved. That's why I've been doing this. God, what a relief to figure that out. Because I didn't know. Because I remember thinking, why do I keep on taking this dope? All it does is screwing me up. I'm nervous and paranoid and I feel miserable. And I want more. God, and I was like that 17 years. What a long and wretched waste of my life. I felt terrible, believe me. I did a lot of things. I was a dope dealer. I ran fast. I ran with a lot of people. You don't sit around being miserable. You try and find something that changes you. I always reckoned if I had more money or more action, or I ran with these boys or that boys, or I went to this country or that new horizon, I would feel different. And I did that stuff, and I did not feel any different. And at the end, the only stuff that I could do that took me out of feeling wretched and guilty and like I was wasting my life, the only things I could do then were stuff that made me so scared, terrified myself, right? I run around with people, and I said, most of my friends are locked up. I was into big dope deals. I was running with people with guns. I was with people who had every reason to expect bullets to come through the window. I was looking all the time. I used every plate glass window I could see to see who was following me. And for sure, the cops knew who I was and what I did. They'd follow me, absolutely, no question. I was a very nervous man. My nerves were a wreck, and I stayed drunk from the morning on, and I stayed stoned, and I'd use things to keep me awake, and it was ridiculous, and it was insane. I made a lot of money, and there's not one damn thing I want that I can buy. I had that money. Most of the time when I was hustling and dealing, I reckoned when I get the money, then I'll be happy. Because I wasn't quite there, I didn't know if it was going to work or not, but I reckoned it would. I made a big pile of money, which I later lost. And I was empty. Just what are you going to buy? Nothing. My wife was gone. You know, of course. Who would she? And you know, it's a miracle she put up with me as long as she did. Friends of mine died, and I was not there for them. I wasn't doing any of the things that I started off in this life to do, to realize some of my capacity. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a nice fellow. I wanted everything to be all right. I did. I didn't set out to be a wreck, you know. But that's where I ended up. And finally, everything got to be such, it was too much, you know. I had enough. I had enough. And finally, all of that, it took me down to the point, the last thing in the world I was ever going to do, I said to a close friend of mine, I said, you know, I've had enough. Because up to that point, I kept smiling. Everything's fine. I can fix it. I have money. I have connections. I have some ability to function in the world on my level. Everything's fine, thank you very much. All the time. If you question me, I got angry about it. I'm fine. Thank you, asshole. And finally I said to a friend, you know what I really want to do? I want to fucking cut my wrists. I want to go to sleep and not wake up. I had enough. I can't play this game anymore. I can't hustle. I can't duck and dodge and dive. I can't do it. And that friend had had his own problems. And he knew a little bit what to do. He took me, he got me, go and talk to this counselor. I was willing to do any goddamn thing. I went to see this guy. This counselor, he said, you ever heard of Narcotics Anonymous? I said, what? You know, I didn't want to know. I didn't want to go to a meeting. I didn't want to stop doping. I didn't want to stop drinking. I did want to stop hurting. That much. And they say to these meetings, you know, they say the only qualification for coming to an NA meeting is the desire to stop using. I didn't even have that. I didn't want to stop using. I had always used, except for that 10 times when I quit and it didn't work and I started again, you know. I forgot about that. I said, I've always used. They said, look, just try. Just go to one. If you want life to be better. Look, I want life to be better. I honestly swear to God, want life to be better. I'd had enough. And I went to the meeting, and I didn't like any of what I heard. These people were, you know, fuck me, you're in trouble. Jesus, eh? And I went back to my friend and said, well, I'm not going there anymore. You know, he says, come on, give it another try. Go again. And I went back, and I didn't like it. He says, go again. All right, I'll go again, you know. And it took me a while. I was slow, you know. But I remember, bit by bit, I started to hear something that I could relate to. Remember, one guy says, well, I was kind of the leader of a youth cult group, something like this. I said, oh yeah, that was me, you know. Long hair, patches, hitchhiking all over, traveling, all that stuff. That was my little fantasy world. I lived in that. And I clicked with that a little bit, and I talked to the fella, and he was a nice enough guy. I said, I'll go back again. I went back again. I went back again. And I started to hear, like I said, they said, this is a disease. And then I thought, that was the first time I started to understand. I thought, it's a disease. Oh, that's why I fucked up my whole life. Now that I know it's a disease, it'll be all right. I'll do whatever they're trying to get me to do here. Everything's going to be all right. And for a brief moment, I was, I cheered up. And then to be honest about it, I kind of fell completely to pieces, because I had built my life around being stoned, around having money, around running dope deals, and I took all that stuff away. Some of it was taken away. But the one thing I knew was, no matter how wretched I feel, no matter how depressed I am, the guilt about my divorce, about squandering my life, about throwing away chances that I could see I had thrown away, about my friend that died, and I never even went to see him for he died because I was so fucking stoned. I can't believe, it hurt bad. I just hurt bad. But I knew that if I went back, if I had a drink, if I had some dope, I was just going to go through the whole damn cycle again, and I just wasn't going to do that. And my pain went on for a long time. I used for 17 years. It wasn't all over in a minute. It wasn't, I like to say, and then everything was fine. But it is now, but it wasn't right away. It took me a long time. And I was slow to get to more meetings. The one thing I must say, I was quick to pick up, I started doing service. And that only means like the chance to go, like I'm doing a bit of service by talking now. I would go into prisons, I would go to hospitals, I would go to detox units. I was a dope dealer. There was some good in that I was very organized. I had to be. You don't get that way by sitting on your ass, So I managed to channel some of that. And I went, and when I found myself with a bunch of people who needed help, I could find the energy to talk to them. I'd say, this program works. I got 6 months clean. I never had it in my life. Then a little later, I got 9 months. It does work if you work it. And I got a year. I got my 1-year birthday. And it worked for me because I was working the program. This is like tools. I always like to think this. This program, what they call the 12 steps, going to the meetings, talking honestly as I'm trying to do now, these are tools, right? If you pick up tools and use them, combine them with your sweat and your intelligence, tools will work for you. If you leave the tools lying on the table and just look at them and then go off somewhere else, they're not going to work for you. Simple as that. Simple as carpenter's tools. You pick them up and you use them and they make something for you. And I have done that, and I've now done it for 5.5 years. And life is the best life I ever had, That's amazing. So much to say. The stuff that is gone is all the regret, the paranoia, the fear. I can accept now. I was sick. Because when I'm working on the cure, I'm not sick anymore. And that allows me to believe that before I really was sick. And that's why I've screwed up so badly, because of this disease. As long as I keep investing in the program, I'm not sick anymore. I believe if I ever take a drink or a drug again, it will trigger off all of that stuff again. I got out of prison when I was in prison many years ago now, and I came straight back. In prison, I was manageable, because you only had so much time. You do this, you do that. I did weights, I ran, I did what I did, When I got out, I went straight back to pieces, and I stayed there for another 10 years. And today, there are not enough hours in the day for all the things that I want to do. I do so much stuff. I'm involved in sports. I'm involved in artwork. My real big and proud thing now is that now, at the age of 38, I'm 38 years old, I'm getting a professional education. I always thought, if I could do it over again, I think everybody reckons this. God, if I could start at the beginning knowing what I know now. I thought, God, I'd like to be a doctor, And that to me is like a complete fantasy. I got no background, not that direction, nowhere at all. I'd be a doctor if I hadn't been a screwed up, doped out dope dealer, I'd be a doctor. And now at the age of 38, I am well on the way to a medical degree. And I just can't believe that as I say that, But it is the truth. And I am doing it one day at a time. The way I got clean, the way I stay clean, one day at a time, that is how I am pursuing this education. About 20 years after many people do their education, here at the end of my 30s, and why not? Hell, I'll finish, I'll be 42, 43. But if I don't do it, I'll be 42, 43. I might as well finish off and have an advanced technical skill. that'll make me some good to people. And I am doing it for purely selfish reasons, believe me. Everything I do, helping other people, that's selfish in a deepest sense, because it makes me feel good to help other people. If I get these skills to really learn about the body, which is a source of fascination to me, how it works, I will have the capacity to help people. Always, through my using and through my early recovery, I always work with handicapped people. I believe that. I really, really, it means so much to me. I started off, I must say, because I was so sorry for these poor people my age in bloody wheelchairs, you know. And after a little while, you forget you're sorry for them, and you just get to realize what nice people they are. And after a while, you wake up and you realize these people with their courage and their guts and their good sense of humor, they give me far more than I ever give them. And I always hung on to that when I was loaded and when I'm clean, you know. And now I know when I get these skills that I'm working on, I can't believe I'm going to know as much as my teachers. But I'm doing well. You know, I get the marks, and I have to just have faith that I keep on. At the end, I will know, you know. Then I can do more. And by helping other people, I will feel good, and I want to feel good. That's all I want. I want to be happy. And I'm doing it. I can't believe it. You know, it's beyond belief. Now, sometimes I still get really paranoid, and really afraid, and really, really a big feeling of worthlessness. You know, and I think, I can't make it. I'm going to fuck up. Now, when I started off at this school, it's a big posh school, and it's, Jesus, you know, I got the application forms, and I didn't even fill them out. I was so intimidated by all the big, oh my God, all the stuff you had to fill out, that I didn't even do it. And when I got up nerve and I filled it out, I went around, you know, and they accepted me. I couldn't believe it, you know. And what happened, how to say this, you know, what I want, what I really like, is a big sign from God. You are doing the right thing. Now, preferably, I like this in writing of flames, letters of flame across the sky. Perhaps I could pull a sword from a stone, or perhaps a luminous stairway up to the clouds. I would love that. I really like that. A burning bush with a voice. This would be good. Robin, you're all right, man. That would be great. That would be good. I would settle for that. But so far, that hasn't happened. But what did happen was this. This is weird, but this is true. I start off at this school, big posh place, right? I say, you know, well, this year is the 75th anniversary of this school, and to celebrate the 75th anniversary, we're having a scholarship competition, right? Now, what they had, you had to write an essay, you know, and about why the school is a good place and what this medical practice can help the community, etc., like that. You know, imagine what they'd want, right? And I heard this and I thought, aha, God, I talk a lot. I'll put it all down on paper, and I'll have a go. I'll give it a try, right? And the day come when they're going to announce the results, I did it, and I thought I couldn't do it, and I tried, and I tried, and I tried, and I tried, and I wrote the damned essay, and I put it in, and I thought, by God. There's like 4 second prizes and a first prize. The first prize, they had to have a background of academic excellence. I thought, well, forget that. My background is many things, but it is not academic excellence. But I might get one of these second prizes, by God. And the day come when they're going to phone you up if you won, and I'm kind of hanging around by the phone thinking, doesn't really matter to me. I don't mind, you know, looking at the phone. And it rang. And he said, Robin? Yes? There's some news for you. My heart is going to pieces. And he, yes, you won a scholarship. Thank you very much. Click. I started to cry, right? I'm so worked up about this. I called up my friends in the fellowship, and people have really been supportive of me and helped me get through all this hard times. I won the second prize. Open the second prize, you know. Go to pieces. This is good. I went back in. They said, come around the office and pick up this prize. I go in to pick up the second prize and say, Mr. Robin, yes? Oh, you've won the first prize. I said, no, there's a mistake. I said this. I said, there's a mistake. You know, I never won that. You must check. They phoned up the central office. Oh, yes, you won the first prize. I won the first prize. Now, I mean, it's not the voice out of a burning bush, but it's pretty damn close. I'm a wreck. I'm a fucking nutcase, dope-dealing, ex-con, smack out, flip out. To give me the first prize. I had to go and get this first prize off the Royal Princess. I borrowed his suit, right? I walk up and all these people clapping for me. He shook my hand, handed me his diploma. Jesus Christ. Now, look, I wouldn't believe this. Believe me, I just wouldn't ever believe this. It's like, somebody else, it happened to him. This is never going to happen to me. And it did. What to say about it? All I did was listen and keep going to the damn meetings, no matter how little you feel like it on any one day. And most of the time you love it. It's good. These are nice people, and I want to do it. Stay clean. If you pick up, you're fucked. Right? Do your best just for the day, and try not to beat the hell out of yourself. And it works. And I say a prayer for my friends who never got this program, they never got a chance. They're nice people, and they're rotting in prisons. They don't belong there. And I say a prayer for them. And I thank everybody for listening to me. And thanks for having me. Thank you. Thanks.
I'm John, I'm an addict. And nice to be here this morning. I know how I'm going to start because I've been sitting there thinking about it, and I'm going to start by saying that I live just off the Portobello Road, about 3 streets from where I did the worst of my using. And yesterday I bumped into somebody who knew me then, and somebody who's still using. And they said, "Wow, you look really good. You look really well. You look a lot better than you did." And it felt really good. But listening to her and her reasons why she couldn't ever come to meetings and she couldn't ever leave the drugs alone. It made me grateful that I'm doing what I'm doing, and made me wonder why it was, because I felt what she was saying. I was almost like agreeing with her that it is impossible. That because I know where she is at, I can still feel that. I can remember hearing about NA 7 or 8 years ago, and being interested because I was aware that I was an addict. I was aware that my life wasn't going anywhere. But when the person that was talking about NA said, they don't use drugs anymore, they don't even drink, it was just too extreme a solution to the state I was in. My using briefly started with alcohol and smoking dope and taking speed and coming to London for all-night parties when I lived down in Brighton. I came to live in London, smoked a lot more dope, drank a lot more, took acid and speed and coke, and used like that for about 10 years. Took me a long time to get around to taking smack. When I did, my life took a complete turn from sort of using drugs as something on top of the rest of my life. I mean, I carried on working, I carried on trying to keep some semblance of order, paying rent, paying bills. When I got into smack, it was a complete turn to drugs becoming my whole life. I dealt smack, and I went to prison, and was completely lost in being a junkie, and saw no way out of that. My idea at that time was that in the 20th century, really we'd be having utility belts. We'd be wearing utility belts. They'd have syringes in them. We'd have uppers and downers. We'd have everything we needed, and that way I'd be perfectly happy. My 10, 12 years using heroin were a kind of slow deterioration. I started going to prison, and Really, they were the only times when I got a chance to think about doing anything about the state I got into, and the only solutions I came up with were to try and use on Mondays, Wednesdays and Saturdays only, and to get scripted, and they weren't solutions at all, but I carried on trying combinations of those ideas. And the last time I went to prison, I was determined not to go back there again, and the solution then was that I really needed to change, and the way I saw I could change was to get on a TOPS course, to get a trade. I really needed to be a bricklayer or a plumber, or what I became, an electrician, because that way I could go out and work, I could buy whatever drugs I wanted, and I wouldn't have to resort to the kind of, to dealing, to the other kinds of crime I was getting into to support my habit. And I did that. I got this qualification and I got a good job, and I was still left with this this hole inside me that I didn't know how to fill any other way but to get it works and have at least some smack in it, hopefully some coke as well, to make myself feel good. My using had to really deteriorate before I would really find a way out of it, and I lived, as I said, 3 streets away from where I live now, in a house that was devoted to using. It was open 24 hours a day for people to score, people to sell, people to buy and sell stolen goods, to the police coming around all the time. People came and died in the toilet, and my life was a nightmare. I really would rather have gone to sleep and not woken up. I couldn't see any way out of this life that I'd chosen for myself, really. I mean, when I set out and took drugs, I'd decided on a certain path for my life, and this is where it had got me. It had got me to a room in the basement of this house, and where I was completely unsafe, completely frightened, completely on my own. I was there for 2 years, and it was a living nightmare. So that when I did manage to get away from there, and I got away from there with the offer of a job selling hot dogs and hamburgers down the West End, and money again, I was earning money again, I still had this nightmare living inside me. And I turned to the old solutions that I knew. I knew that if you had a good habit going, it was a good time to go and get yourself registered for methadone, because you needed to give positive samples to the clinic. So I went down to the Charing Cross DDU and got myself set up with another methadone script. I didn't have any ideas about giving up drugs, but I knew something was really wrong inside, and that something really had to change. I got my methadone script and carried on using. The job fell apart, and I ended up with the job went a flat that I was in, and I ended up staying on other people's flats for a while, and then this empty flat in Roehampton came up that was miles away from anyone I knew, and was going to be available for some time because the guy had gone abroad, and so I went and stayed in this flat in Roehampton and got completely isolated. I was sick of using, really. I was sick of the people that I had to go and see to score from. I was sick of trying to find little veins up the side of my fingers and in my toes to inject into, and I was sick of not even really getting stoned when I did all that. But what I couldn't stop was my head. What I couldn't do was just lie down, put my head on a pillow and go to sleep. I had to sedate myself somehow, and I did that for a while with mixtures of brandy and methadone and whatever I had. I avoided meeting other people. I'd check the spy hole of the front door in my flat to make sure there was nobody in the stairwell before I went out. I'd go and do some shopping at garages at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd lie there with the television on all the time, but not really taking in much of what was happening, and I was totally miserable. Twice every fortnight I had to go out. I had to go and get a personal issue gyro from the DSS, and I had to go and get a fortnightly prescription from the DDU for the methadone. And on one of these occasions I met somebody who I'd known for a long time. I'd known them for 10 years, always bang at it using, somebody who always had gear or could get gear, somebody who'd been to India and brought gear back, somebody who'd been in prison here and in India for using, and I almost didn't recognize him. He was clean, he was wearing smart clothes, his hair was washed, and we called him Greasy, what's his name, because his hair was always unwashed, and he was clean, and he smiled when I saw him. This is somebody who I only ever saw before hunched over a tile with maybe a grimace, making it into two exactly equal halves, and always totally serious about everything that he was doing. And he smiled when he saw me, and he looked relaxed, and he said, "I'm clean, I've been clean for about 6 months." And I said, "Well, let's go over to the pub." And he said, "No," he said, "I don't even drink, and I'm going to Narcotics Anonymous meetings." We went and had a coffee, which is something that I hadn't done since I was 13 or 14, and he told me a bit about NA. He didn't lay it on me, he just said, "Well, it's quite simple." He said they have these meetings, there's loads of them. We were in Earl's Court, he said there's loads of them around here, Chelsea, Notting Hill. And people just sit around in rooms and they talk about what it was like using, and they talk about what it's like trying to stay clean. This was all, it was all a bit too simple for me, and even then I was thinking, well, this is for people who were emotionally damaged. This is for people who need help, and I don't really need any help. Nobody knows my life like I do. I'm the only one that can do anything about it. And I left him and went back to the flat I was in Roehampton, and I rang up he'd given me a phone number of NA's helpline, which will put you through to talk to somebody during the day, but I left it till the evening, and if you ring in the evening, you get a list of where all the meetings are in London that day, and I rang it and took a note of where these meetings were, and thought, nah, not really, not for me, and did this for 4 days. I kept ringing and I kept writing them down and not getting it together. And on the 4th day, I got myself to a meeting. It was a Monday, and it was in Chelsea, and it was a meeting called the Beginners Meeting, and I thought, yep, that sounds like the one for me. I went there. I'm still confused enough to wonder which pub they'd go to afterwards to have a drink, but I got myself into this meeting, and I sat down. There were 20 people in this room, and I was scared, I was rigid, sat against the wall at the back, and I listened to these people. I listened to them talk about everything that I used to do. I listened to them talk about the simple things, the shoplifting and the jumping the tube fares, and the more serious things, the using, and I heard people being totally honest about what they'd done, and that was what struck me more than anything. That what kept me awake at night, unless I was sedated, was something in my head that wanted to recall everything that I'd fucked up ever. It wanted to go through all the jobs I'd had where I'd ripped people off, all the cars that I'd had and crashed and run away from, or just parked and left somewhere, all the relationships I'd been in where I'd screwed people over, friends and girlfriends, the flats I'd had that I'd trashed and again walked away from, left bills everywhere. My head wouldn't leave me alone. It wanted to go on and on about everything that I'd done. And I was adding to that daily. I was still shoplifting, I was still jumping the tubes, and the honesty that I heard in these meetings, I knew then I could translate into my ordinary life, that if I was going to be able to walk through life with my head up, I needed to do some fairly simple, basic things in my life, like go to Tesco's and get a basket and put the shopping in the basket, not stuff it down my sleeves and down my trousers. And it meant I could buy a ticket and go on the tube and not spend the whole journey wondering whether a guard or inspector was going to come on and throw me off. And it was enough to convince me that I could get clean and stay clean with this change in my life. That what I've learned since then is that probably before I ever used drugs, I felt bad about myself. That I used drugs a lot of the time, although it started off fun. The end of my using was about taking something to take the pain away, until eventually it didn't take the pain away at all. And that what I needed to do to put something into my life that I could feel good about was to do something good. To live life like other people do on its own terms. I've actually found it quite easy with that in my mind to stop using. And when I talked to this girl yesterday, she was saying, don't you ever think about using now? And I said, yeah, I think about it. And I think that it's no alternative to what I've got. It would make my life more painful. It doesn't have the attraction that it had, which was that it was the only thing that was going to make me feel good. The things that make me feel good now are having friends that I care about, that I really enjoy being with, belonging to something, belonging to the human race at least, but belonging as well to something that's trying to improve the quality of people's lives. I feel I'm privileged. I'm sitting here now saying things that maybe somebody else will hear, and maybe it will encourage them to do something about their lives, because it is possible to get away from what seems like a totally hopeless situation and turn it completely around. And I'm going to finish there. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr.
Thanks. My name's Martin. I'm an addict. And it's really nice to be given the opportunity to speak, even though I'm not really sure what I'm going to talk about. Everything that I say, really, I've learned over the last few years that I've been involved in NA. My life prior to coming to NA was pretty much like any other using addict. At the end of my using, although I had nothing left, I still thought I knew everything. I think that is really the sort of prerequisite of an addict, that I had this incredible arrogance that if I didn't know, or what I didn't know wasn't worth knowing, and yet I still found myself in prison, sort of completely bereft of any kind of friendships. I'd lost touch with the normal, or whatever the normal worldly things are, and my whole life was centered in and around getting and using drugs. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the years of using that much, other than the fact that I started using when I was about 17, and I actually got clean in this fellowship 17 years later. And in the course of that journey of using, you know, there were moments when life seemed okay. But like everybody else that I've met in NA since, I tried every single route to try to control my using. From using on bank holidays to putting my drugs into little bags marked up different days, from changing different women, from changing locations, and obviously searching for the ultimate cocktail of chemicals that was going to really fix me. So I was a deluded addict who lived in a dream world, who really believed that there must be some combination of woman, location and chemical that was going to make me feel safe. And my life didn't fall apart for many years, at least outwardly, but I've got one memory of prison which I would like to share, and in retrospect it tells me a lot about how I was. And by the time I'd got to prison I was 32, and I'd been in prison for about 4 months on remand, and I had no family left. My wife had enough sense to leave me. My brother couldn't take the pain of visiting me in yet another institution, and when my father had died, and my mother was the only one that always propped me up, and I was expecting her to visit, and I wasn't called from my cell, and it was getting late, and I knew something had happened. And just before they finished the visit, I got a call and went along, and I saw my mother, and she came along to see me, and her dress was covered in blood. And she'd had an accident. She was getting old and probably ill with me. And we started talking, and she told me what had happened. She fell over down the escalators, and people wanted to call an ambulance, but she really had to go and visit her son. And what happened in the course of that visit, after 5 minutes of hearing that, I ended up having an argument with her because she brought me the wrong cigarettes. Instead of bringing me Capstan full strength, she brought me Players. And at the time I could see nothing wrong. That was how I always was, you know. I was so self-centered. I was so full of me. And it's a very sad state and place to be in. And anyway, I finished my remand. I was in prison for 10 months. I was actually abstinent from most of my chemicals. In fact, totally abstinent probably for 3 or 4 months. And I came out of prison, and the first thing I did was to go and use. I did not know any other way to live. Even though I was full of good intentions, I knew nothing else to do other than to go and use. And I used for another couple of years, and went back into institutions again, and was finding that I was spending increasingly short periods of time outside of institutions. To be frank, I was much happier, if that's the right word, in an institution than I was out. And when I came to NA, the day before I came to NA, I really believed my life was over. I was walking the streets, a very sad and pathetic case, really. I didn't even have the energy to go and rob someone or manipulate someone, because there was no one left in my life. And I walked to the Salvation Army in Covent Garden, and asked to be put up, and even they turned me away, and walked back in the rain, and I will never forget the emptiness that I felt at that stage of my life, where I knew no one wanted to know me. I was homeless and friendless, and above all, I was hopeless. And I'd heard somebody mention this self-help group called Narcotics Anonymous, and really and truly, I don't know what made me go to a meeting, but I knew there was a meeting that night in Swiss Cottage, and somehow or the other I got along there. I think it was the first time in my life that I was actually open-minded, because I really lost the plot completely. I'd run out of ideas, and something in me didn't want it, as much as I wanted to die, something in me couldn't do it. And I went to that meeting, and in the course of 90 minutes, meeting in some kind of citizens' advice bureau, sitting in a room full of other people, strangers really, that I didn't know, my whole life has changed. It's a very miraculous thing that happens in an NA meeting, and I can't, after being nearly 8 years clean, I still cannot explain the magic that happens inside an NA meeting. But for me, I kind of felt that I was an orphan, and that I came back to this fellowship. I was 34 at this stage, and really found my tribe. And I think really that's what NA is about for me. A bunch of people that really all feel the same about things, and that have all reached this point in life. And in the nearly 8 years that I've been coming to meetings, I've never yet been to a meeting where somebody's come in singing "Oh, what a beautiful morning," or come in and said that their life's so wonderful. It's a sad thing, but addicts seem to have to reach a certain point until they become willing to do something about it. So I would like to just share a few things about what's happened to me on the journey since I've been clean. I've had the most incredible things happen. I'd like to say that above all, sometimes I find life very hard, and that doesn't really change. Sometimes life is really hard. But I think if I'd have asked for one thing when I got clean, it would have been for that despair to have been taken away. And for me, very quickly, after going to a few NA meetings, I started to feel that there was hope. I had no great designs left on life. I really didn't need to live in a palace or drive a car or really do anything that in any kind of material terms, but I just really wanted to feel some kind of peace of mind, and that hope triggered all sorts of things for me. I met people who didn't reject me, who said to me, "Martin, you're doing really well, just don't use today and get to another meeting." And I did this for at least the first year. I went to sometimes 2 meetings a day. I started to meet people and learn about life, because the one thing that I remember saying when I was in prison, people used to come into my cell, you know, and have a spliff or whatever, and I used to lay back on my bed and I used to think, do you know what, if I never get out of prison, I've done everything. There is nothing I've not done. I've been around the world, and the shock really was that I'd never known the first thing about life. I would have missed out on so much, because really and truly the last 8 years for me has been an experience that I can almost say was worth all the suffering that I went through for all those years. Very strange things happen when you get clean. I think I would have carried on using if I could have changed my luck. You know, every New Year's Eve I used to say to whoever was left to listen to me, you know what, next year I think my luck's due to change. I mean, it's about time that and I'd never associated that my luck and my using had anything to do with each other. I thought I was just on this bad run that seemed to get worse and worse. And what I've realised in recovery is that when you use, you lose. It is a package deal. There's no separation. And that when you stop using, somehow, miraculously, your luck changes. Not overnight, and sometimes, you know, I've had to learn to be patient and to wait. But somehow there's incredible things start to happen when you get clean. And I was about 3 months clean, and this is a fairly well documented story in NA, but I was about 3 months clean, and I was really willing to go to any lengths. And I had a sponsor who said to me that really that is the only thing you need. If you're willing to be guided and to be shown, then I will never have to use again, one day at a time. And I wasn't working, and I was kind of feeling happy, but I was hungry, and I had no money, and I was waiting for an NA meeting to start, and there wasn't one due to start till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was walking around at 9 in the morning starving, and I walked past the phone box, and I was about to swallow my pride to ask somebody to lend me some money, but there was a very short list of people to ask. And as I picked up the receiver, money just started to pour out of this phone box, to the point of complete embarrassment. Could not stop the machine pouring out money, and it was really nice. I kind of, you know, went out, had a real good breakfast, went to a meeting, shared it with everyone that I've had a sign from God and all that sort of stuff. But nice stuff started to happen to me, and you know, in usual addict fashion, I went back to that phone box every day for about a week, and it never repeated the same thing. But it's a fascinating journey, recovery. You know, I've often thought that really once you're clean, anything at all is possible. Because for me, if I'd have been asked what was the most impossible thing to ever happen to you, I would have said to not take a chemical. And now that the impossible for me has already happened, I do believe anything is virtually possible, and with a bit of willingness and with the guidance of my friends, and even guidance from not my friends, people in NA meetings. We're like one big family, and very often I get help if I'm open-minded enough from a person that I particularly dislike, which is a fascinating insight into what this group of men and women are all about. Yeah, strange things have happened to me. My life, I've built a completely new life. Even so much to the fact that the place that I now live was the block of flats that I was sent to prison for burgling 8 years earlier, and I've ended up living in the same block of flats through the strangest set of coincidences that one could possibly imagine. And the thing for me about NA is that I realised at maybe quite a late stage in life that as an addict I cannot do anything alone. That doesn't mean that people take my problems away from me, but that I need people, and I need the feedback that I get from people in the fellowship. And it's such a magical group of people that I know that if this tape is produced, and if this tape ever gets into an institution, and if a person may be listening in their cell and hearing me speak by some strange coincidence, I know that person could well be a future chairman of a committee of one of our service branches of NA, and that's the wonderful thing about this fellowship. We have no leaders, we're all addicts, some have more clean time than others, and the whole lifeblood of this fellowship is new people who come and not do good and not be self-righteous, but come to share their message of hope and faith that there is another way to live. And really, one of the things, as strange as it may sound, that I really treasure is that I know that one day I will be able to die clean, with some self-respect, with some dignity, and with love of my friends and my new family. And for me, that's really more important than the crown jewels. It works. It works if you work it. I've been helped by people who've come from completely different backgrounds to me. I've learned that it makes no difference where I get my help from. You know, whether it's from the person I get my cigarettes from in a shop in the morning, or from my sponsor, or from people that I've just met, that really, when it comes to living clean, I've still got a hell of a lot to learn, and I'm really grateful to have been given the opportunity to speak today. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Johnny and I'm an addict.
Hi, Johnny.
I can never get over feeling, I suppose in a way, self-conscious when I'm asked to speak out in the open, but it's kept me clean. And, listening to the last speaker, Robert, it's amazing how our lives do turn around, once we surrender to this program. And for me, the insanity of addiction, active addiction, was insane. It was lonely, isolating, degrading, demoralising. And since I've been clean, I've never had to have those kind of feelings. And it is a disease of isolation. So, and even as a recovering addict, I'm pretty much aware of, on a daily basis, my inner thoughts and stuff like that. But a lot of the things that I learned when I first came around was from some of the old school recovering people, because when I came around there was no NA back in 1980, and I've been clean a day at a time nearly 13 years, and that's a miracle for someone like me. And it's been swings and roundabouts, but you keep it. These old timers, it's a day at a time. You get to meetings, no matter what you say is going on in your life. They say, "Are you clean?" "Yeah." "Have you been to a meeting?" "Yeah." "Okay." And that's pretty much the way it does work. And I didn't really start using. Well, I was drinking at the age of 15 to 19, but I didn't really start using drugs until I was about 19, and I was involved because work and me don't get on. I could never be a company director, but again, you can always be surprised in this program. I might end up, who knows? But work and me still don't get on. But on a daily basis, I'm okay. I've got quite a bit of money, and I've got everything I want, and but those are all just little gifts that we get, and I appreciate them. But what I I found out was that, you know, in my early years as a teenager, I was on the streets at 15. So I had to learn fast how to look after myself. And I got involved in some very, very heavy crime. And at the age of 21, I got a 10-year prison sentence for armed robbery and attempted murder. And it went from there. But you see, I didn't understand about resentments and anger. And I was told when I came into fellowship, they said, here son, when you come in you better get a dictionary. I says, why? Because you're going to hear some words you never heard before. And they were right, and I actually went out and got myself a dictionary. Second-hand one, of course. Had half the pages missing. But because I used to hear these tolerance, what are they on about tolerance? I said, that's what it means, you know. But, you know, like I never said I would, all the time out on the streets I said I won't become this, I won't become that. And I ended up being that. And I think once you get caught up in this disease, for me, it really does get you. And I mean, I took drugs, and when I first took drugs I thought, this is very romantic, I feel romantic. And even the bouncers on the club doors used to look nice, because I used to love having a fight with that. And even they, I'd spend half hour talking to them, and I'd, you know, the next day I'd really be embarrassed by it all, but that's what addiction was like, you know. And I had some beautiful relationships with non-addicts, and you know, the lying and cheating. And I think the gift of being able to make amends is good, but you know what we've been asked to talk about is that most important step. The first one is admitting that I'm an addict and that my life is unmanageable. And I could never ever admit that. Never ever admit, with all that insanity going on in my using. Because later I was drinking alcohol and I thought, well, I'm not fixing. Drinking alcohol and taking Valium by, you know, whatever, and have the occasional bit of speed. And I ended up on the streets, and the Dossers used to call me the Mad Indian and stay away from me, because, you see, I wasn't one of them. You know, I thought I shouldn't be here, it's embarrassing, but I was there. And I always lose track about things, because like someone once told me, one of my someone who knows me who's outside and they're a speaker, they said you should take elocution lessons and learn how to speak. I said, well, sorry, I speak from my heart, and that, you know, whatever comes out is me, and you know, I can't be a phony. Well, what do you mean a phony? I said, well, I can't, you know. So you know, that's what I do. And but you know, I learned also coming into the program about the Yets. I call it the Yeti Club. You know, sometimes when I hear people, they say, "Well, I never went to prison." I go, "Yet," in my head. Or I never did this yet. And thank God I don't have to do all the yets yet again. And I was told, you know, when I started going to prison meetings, there was a lot of fear involved, and fear is lack of faith anyway. But you see, because prisons were bad luck to me. If I went past a prison, I wouldn't do a robbery, or, you know, it was a sign. And if I saw a policeman walking backwards, you know, that was a bad sign. And I used to have these ridiculous little things, you know, that was bad signs. Today I don't have that. And what I've found that for me is that you know, I'm very proud of this fellowship, you know, and that's step 1, 2 and 3 are so important in my life today, because without those I couldn't do any of the others. And at the moment, those 3 steps are very important in my life at the moment. I'm trying to keep it simple. And you know, like when I first came around, and like there wasn't no NA, and I knew I was a fully qualified alcoholic, so I went along to AA, and that's all we had at the time. And I used to say, well, I'm a drug addict as well. We don't talk about that here. You see, I still don't like authority, but I can deal with them. If you say something, you can't do that, then I say, you know, oh yeah, you would. And in fact, NA started in 1980, in August, the first week in August of 1980, with a resentment. So, you know, if you have a resentment, you can really turn it around, you know, and there's a lot of people that are alive today and recovering today because of a resentment, you know, and at times, you know, you see, when I came into the fellowship, I wasn't too tightly wrapped. I wasn't, you know, I came in off the street, one shoe on my foot, and I progressed, I've got, you know, it's just nice, you know, it's trying to keep it simple. And what shoes do I wear today, you know? Isn't life complicated? I mean, and, but it's just amazing, and, you know, this program, you know, it's absolutely, you know, like, I don't know, you know, it's a spiritual program, and the spiritual awakening that I had was that I didn't have to use, and that I found freedom. And freedom from all that insanity and stuff like that, and the past. And I'm really glad I'm not living in that world. And, you know, it's, I got a letter this morning from a friend of mine who tried getting clean in the program. There was a lot of insanity going on. And I believe that when a recovering addict talks on a one-to-one, it's confidential. It doesn't go any further. But he had to go and do another robbery and got caught because he did it on his own. Like me, he don't trust no one, so he won't go team-handed. It's like I'm recommending it, you know, I'm not at all recommending go and do a robbery. But he did, and he ended up getting caught and got 8 years. And he was telling me in the letter about how things are going, and he said at the end of the letter, I was going to bring it, but it's personal. And he said, Johnny, I'm clean. I might wake up in a cell tomorrow, but I've got hope. And that takes a lot of guts. I know a girl in America that's doing 90 years. She celebrated 6 years clean without a meeting, just with the book. So it can be done, you know. And those kind of people are my kind of people. I don't stick around moaning minis. I'm not too popular in that area. I just say, go and help someone, go and do a bit of service. You know, I'm trying not to swear here. Because when I get excited or talk about certain subjects, you know, I was talking to my old sponsor who's celebrating 20 odd years, you know, and we were talking about certain issues, and I was blaspheming a bit on the phone, but there you go, you know, even the Queen blasphemes, you know, we all do. But anyway, I'd just like to say that, you know, like, this program has given me hope, you know. When I was in prison, I never used to have hope. And when it was getting near to coming out, and like my last sentence I did was through something I did in a blackout. And it was totally, I don't remember it to this day, but I got a year, which weren't bad, a year, you know, it was kip time for me. Apparently I was in a shoe shop at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, who does that? That is not me. I mean, if I'm going to get a pair of shoes, I'll nick them during the day. And so I thought, well, it's you know, the usual crap, it's a fit up, you know, and all this. But apparently I was in the shoe shop, 3 o'clock in the morning, up at Acton somewhere. And I still only ended up in one shoe, and that one I found out in the street. So, you know, I was very successful as a criminal, very, you know. But I'd just like to more or less wind up by saying, you know, where I'm at the moment, and it's quite important, you know, because they say illness in recovery, you know, and it's been, you know, a day at a time for me, you know, it's nearly, it'll be 13 years a day at a time next month, but for the last 7 years I've suffered a lot of physical pain, and I could legally take drugs and stuff like that, which the doctor has offered, But no, and apparently my kidneys have now collapsed. And I was in hospital a few weeks ago, and I was in absolute agony. And I've always been a fighter. You know, some people can go placidly. Some people like people around them. Me, and that's the way I am. That's the way I survive. And it was a shock to the system. And I was up near a place where I know we're using addicts. And this is how spiritual I can think. You see, I can think a lot of things, but I don't have to act on them. That's what I found out. And I thought, if I see a using addict, I'm going to chin them. Because I want to be around people that are not using, because I need winners around me, I need gutsy people. And that's what I do. I surround myself with those kind of people, you know. Thank God I didn't see a using addict. But, you know, a lot of things happened. And it took me over 11 years to cry in this program. It's not because I'm Mr. Macho Man or whatever. You know, I used to be a ladies' hairdresser, all for the wrong reasons, but I had a good time. And anyway, what happened? You know, I have got a kidney failure, and they, you know, like the doctor said to me, he said, don't try and be a martyr, you know. And even though I hadn't used for that long, they took a HIV test, which was, you know, still quite daunting. And I had to wait 8 days for the results, but I was in so much pain and agony. And then when all that pain went, I started crying. Not, you know, sort of dramatically, but just nicely. And I find that tears are like healing. I feel like I've healed myself, you know. And the nurse said to me, why are you crying? I said, because I'm not in pain. She said, very strange. And there's a 7-year-old little girl who's got the same problems as me, and I'm 46, and she's 7 years old, and, you know, like, it's touch and go, and she said, we'll be all right. And every time I see her, she said, we'll be all right. But the last 3 weeks, it hasn't been all right, and things have been going wrong. And I got a phone call last night, amazingly enough, a newcomer, one of the very few that I always give my number to people, you know, 99% of the time that are new in the program, because that's what was done for me. And this guy was telling me confidentially what was going on, and he wanted to use. And we were chatting away, and in the end I said, you know what I would do? He said, what? Go to a meeting, you know. And I guarantee, and even try and say something, I guarantee you'll feel better. He said, fair enough. And then as soon as I put the phone down, the phone rang, and it was the kidney unit, the outpatients, and the nurse said, I've got to go phone up the ward on Sunday to find out if there's a bed, because I've got to have another biopsy, because things are not going right, you know. But, and then as soon as I got that phone call, I automatically, because I'm human, like anyone else, and I automatically went down. I thought, oh God, you know. And, but within a matter of minutes, I came back out of it. Pick up the phone, you know, and I phoned people up. And I've been told some horrific things of what the symptoms that I've got, high blood pressure, this, that, and that, without going into detail. And it's not comfortable, you know, there is a lot of things going on. But, you know, today I'm alive. And not to be morbid, I mean, I slept in a graveyard for a year up in Kensington. And now, I thought, now, if I do snuff it, I think what I'll do is have on my gravestone, I told you I was ill. And now do you believe? I think that's what I would do, you know, and because, like, you know, who knows what happens after death. You know, I was talking to a priest years ago, he says, you are going to hell. I said, Father, I'm in hell right now. And I think most addicts that are recovering today have been to that hell, you know, and it is hell. So, but on a good note, you know, is that, you know, I can go through anything, it's a day at a time, and you never know what's going to happen in this program, what's going to be thrown at you. And like Robert said, it's growing up periods, you know. It's about growing up, and it's about making decisions and standing by them. And I think most of all is that, like I am me, you know, I can't be anyone else. I've tried to be and wasn't very successful, but I'm successful today, you know. And I'm not, you know, each day I learn something more. And you know, this program, I don't know, it's incredible. I've seen this program grow from one meeting, from nothing to what it is today, and we're still growing. We haven't even reached all that we want to, and you know, it's incredible. And I remember at one time we wanted to close because we weren't reaching anyone. We said, where are they? Don't know, you know, they're all dead, or, you know, where are all the addicts? But there's plenty out there. And you know, I'd just like to finish off by saying, you know, like, you know, it's okay to be me today, you know. I don't make friends easy, but those who I make I normally keep, you know. And, you know I'm not too tightly wrapped, but could be a lot worse, could be a lot worse. And I haven't yet been arrested. And I ain't going to tell you some of the things I've got up to, but, you know, but, you know, I haven't had a drink or a drug, and, you know, it's so important. And, you know, I think, you know, like this program, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And no matter what we go through, we don't have to do it, you know, on our own. Because, you know, and I don't know, it's you know, I'm going to start rambling. I would like to say that when I was at the hospital the other Monday at the clinic, I got so much bad news. This doctor was telling me your blood pressure, this, that, and he was telling me about death. You know, he said it's serious. I said, well, you know, and they're very straightforward about it because they're busy, you know. And so I walked out the hospital. He said, we don't know until we get the results, so you'll have to wait for a phone call. And it's nerve-wracking, but day at a time, forget about that phone call, just get on with life, go to a meeting, do this, do that. And that's great, it's a great change for me, you know. And I came out of the hospital, and I don't know why, an addict was selling drugs. He said to me, I've never heard this before, he said, are you wanting? And I said to him, I don't touch the effing stuff. My sponsor said, that's very spiritual. And the guy looked at me, you know, and I thought, the old me, and now this is me, so, you know, I was thinking the old me would have said, come, let's go for a walk. And then I would have got him, said, right, empty your pockets. Da-da-da-da. Now, we're round by a hospital, if I ever see you again, this is where you're going to end up now. Oh, that's what I was thinking like. I mean, it's very spiritual. But it didn't happen, and I suppose inside me there is a fair amount of anger, but that's all right too. You know, I'm not turning over tables and, you know, getting the old bill coming in and someone giving me the liquid cosh. It's great, you know, it's the freedom, and this program works if I work it. And the steps, I find that the steps work around my life. You know, I don't constantly think about them, but I find that they adapt to me. Before I used to try and adapt to them, and I was having a hard time because I was too serious, you know. But I've loosened up a lot, and they adapt to me. So it's nice to be here. It's nice to be clean. It's nice to be free, and we can all be free one day. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
And now I have Martin, who's come along to share with us his experience, strength and hope. I'll pass it to you, Martin.
Thanks. My name's Martin. I'm an addict. I started using drugs when I was 15, and it was a real novelty. You know what I mean? It was a real novelty. And I think the novelty was, I mean, it was in the 60s, and it was, you know, a lot of that kind of stuff going on. But the novelty for me was when I used drugs, I felt okay. Because up until that point, I didn't feel okay. I felt not felt a bit less than everyone else. You know, I didn't feel the full ticket. Let's put it that way. And I've heard people say in our fellowship that they didn't have the instruction manual, and that's how I felt. You know what I mean? I was forever looking over people's shoulders to see what page they were on, because I was fucking lost. And when I used drugs, that didn't seem to matter. You know, I could bluff my way through, and I felt okay. And my using story is, I sort of class it in maybe 3 stages. The first couple of years was a lot of fun. You know, I felt good. I got out and I went to see bands, and I was over Hyde Park to see the Stones and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And it was fun. I've got to say though, right from the start, that the drugs still didn't make me feel a part of anything. I didn't feel a part of that 250,000 people in Hyde Park. I felt the odd one out. Do you know what I mean? And that's how I felt all my life. And the drugs didn't actually stop that. I guess what I did was I didn't really care too much if I was the odd one out. I still felt it. And so there was then a few years where using wasn't such a problem. You know, I could get drugs, I could get good drugs, and I was able. I often think back when I think of using to these times when I was able to have a bath on a Friday night and have a hit in the bath and get up and get dressed and go out. You know, all in order, all nice and clean, and didn't seem to be any problem. And the next stage of my using was a 14-year period of being registered with a clinic and getting my drugs. And that 14 years, I worked, and I bought a home, and I married, and they didn't seem to be a problem then, except that, well, it's Saturday morning this morning, and a Saturday morning for me during that 14 years was 9 o'clock at the chemist, which was every morning, 9 o'clock at the chemist, except Sunday. Saturday would be the special day, because I was getting 2 lots. I had 2 hits on a Saturday, and it was a really special day, you know what I mean? I'd get up, and if it was a sunny morning like today, I'd stroll down there, you know what I mean, have a word with the pharmacist, and hang out, and get my script. And what time is it now? It's 11:30. I would have had my first hit at 9 o'clock, and the rest of the morning would be struggling to hang on to that second hit, the Sunday hit. Could I hang on till this afternoon? Could I hang on till this evening? And you know, could I hang on till tomorrow? And I quickly dismissed that, because that was impossible. I never saved anything for Sunday, never. And so Saturday was about the best it got, you know, and then Sunday I'd be sick. And then 14 years were spent like that. It was 9 o'clock in the morning was the best part of the day for me. And wherever I was working, I would get to the chemist at 9 o'clock, you know, and it didn't matter whether I was in Falls or I was a milkman at one stage, and I'd be out on my round, and I'd take the milk truck back to Boots the chemist in Stanford-le-Hope, right? Half-hour journey to get my script, then back half-hour back to the round, and my firm could never understand why the batteries kept going flat. You know what I mean? They could never understand it, and I knew the batteries would go flat, and I'd have to get a lorry out to pick me up. But I could never, you know, especially Monday morning. There was no way I'd finish my round Monday morning. I was sick as a dog. So that was acceptable, you know. Sunday going sick, and all this stuff going on at work, you know, it didn't seem too much of a problem. And as I say, it went on for 14 years, and I didn't get nicked much during that 14 years. There was a few convictions, and I didn't go up the West End a lot. I went up the West End at the beginning of my using and the end of my using. What happened for me was that the drugs I was getting on prescription, which I was quite happy with at one point, no longer did it for me, and I was forced to, because my clinic wouldn't give me more drugs, I was forced to go out and get extra drugs to mix it, and you know, make up cocktails of drugs, and that's how I started getting nicked again. And I went to prison the first time doing that, swapping some of my script for something else to mix it together. You know what I mean? I could never accept the fact that these drugs weren't going to do it for me forever. You know, once I found my drug of choice, that was it. I was set for life. I thought I would use them for the rest of my life, and I would get on with life. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't be a bother and all the rest of it. And when they stopped working, when they just didn't have the same effect, when things started creeping in, you know, reality started creeping in, I would desperately search for another drug to mix with them, and I'd be off on another 6 months or a year, you know. And as I say, I got nicked 14 years into this prescription, and I ended up in the hospital wing in Pentonville, and it was fucking horrific. You know, because I'd never come off. It was fucking horrific, I tell you. And I felt like a lump of shit, you know what I mean? And I've got to be careful what I say, because I wasn't treated too kindly, you know what I mean? Or I felt I wasn't, you know what I mean? And I probably felt I didn't deserve to be treated too kindly, you know what I mean? And I remember being in the hospital cell, dosed up on Ligactor, and it was terrible. I felt sick. I kept falling asleep. You know, I couldn't move with this Ligactor, and it was like a zombie, but I could still feel everything, you know what I mean? And there was mice coming in the cells. I thought they were mice, so I think it was my imagination, because they wore top hats. And they were, you know, tipping their hats at me and running back behind, and I was really frightened. I was really frightened, you know what I mean? And I got through that, you know, I survived that. And I remember being in that cell, clocking off the days off drugs. Do you know what I mean? And I remember I got to 14 days before they shipped me out to the wing. 14 days of it, I couldn't believe it. 14 days clean. You know, I probably wasn't clean, I don't know what they were giving me, but 14 days without using my drugs. And I was overwhelmed, you know what I mean? I was overwhelmed, I was ticking them off. And it was 3 weeks, you know what I mean, and then and I was feeling better, and I was sleeping, I was going to the toilet, and I was eating. And I liked it, I felt really safe in prison, you know what I mean. And I kept my head down, you know, I kept my head down. I weren't too bothered about scoring in prison and running around and getting into trouble and all that, kept my head down. And about 2 weeks before I was due to get out, it was on me, the obsession to use was fucking on me, and I couldn't sleep at night. You know what I mean? I couldn't sleep, and I was planning it. I mean, it was set up. My wife, you know, had come up to visit me, and I had placed my order. And the night before I got out, I actually got to sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning. I remember it. And I got out the gates, and I'd used within half hour probably. And I did have this illusion that. You know, I was talking a little while back about when I first used Friday nights, keeping it all clean and it not being any bother, not spending the housekeeping on drugs and all the rest of that. And I did have this illusion that maybe I could use every now and again, you know, but it was an illusion. Because when I use drugs, I have the obsession, and it doesn't go away when I'm using. I have this obsession. I wake up in the morning, I have to use, you know. And I was back on the treadmill, only this time I'd lost my clinic script that kept me fairly safe, you know. I copped a real resentment against it. I couldn't understand why they wouldn't give me my script back. Yeah. But another thing I couldn't understand, because addiction for me up to then, I had no problem with saying to people, well, I'm a drug addict, or certain people. I knew that. I knew I was an addict, because I knew I stuck needles in my arms, and if I didn't use, I was sick. So that's an addict, you know, that's as far as it went with me. Yeah, I'm a drug addict, that's it. Now, when I come out of prison this time, as I say, I scored within half an hour, and then I had no money, and I had no physical habit. You know, I was clean, I was fit and healthy, I had no physical habit, and I went off to wherever we were living at the time. And it took me a month, the clinic wouldn't have me back, it took me a month to get on with one of these dodgy doctors in Harley Street. And that month was fucking horrendous, I tell you, it was horrendous, and I had no habit, you know. And I couldn't understand why I felt so raw and so frightened of being out there. It was unbearable, I wouldn't come out, you know. And all I was capable of doing was getting down to the I was on Canvey Island at the time, getting down to this local doctor, he'd give me some Valium, and then he finally agreed to write me a letter to this doctor uptown. And I think I felt the most miserable in my life during that month, you know. And the end of my using was pretty miserable, but that month was fucking horrendous, you know what I mean. And I got the script off the doctor after a month, and I went off on another few years, you know, running, and spent a lot of time in the West End then. I couldn't work, I could no longer work, you know, it had gone beyond that. We lost our house. My wife started using with me, with a vengeance, you know. She had dabbled over the years, and my first daughter was born. My daughter Alex was born 1980, and you know, some people have the illusion that get yourself a job, you know, get married and have some kids and you'll settle down. You know, in my experience that just wasn't true, because I was ill-equipped to deal with a child, you know what I mean, and that responsibility of a child was really frightening, and my using got really chaotic after that, you know what I mean. It was chaotic before she was born, it was just getting there, you know. I'd done my first prison sentence, you know. But it hadn't been chaotic for years, and then it really took off, and it just went to pieces. Any control I thought I had, or I did have, went, you know. And the responsibility of this little girl overwhelmed me, you know. And I couldn't get enough drugs in my system to block that out, you know. That just wasn't, I wasn't capable of blotting that out. And, you know, I thank God today that she was born at that time, because I feel very strongly that although I didn't get clean because I had a baby, as some people would expect you to, you got a baby, now you get clean. I didn't. But my addiction just went forward, and it ran its course, you know, thank God. Because I think, you know, I could suddenly look around and realise, you know, it just wasn't two adults using drugs and losing their house and not working. You know, there was another little person here who needed to be looked after and wasn't getting looked after. And I didn't feel good about that, you know, because the boy started using at 15. You know, he didn't have any plans like that. You know what I mean? He didn't have any plans like that. He didn't plan to go to prison. He didn't plan to be strip searching toilets in the West End, you know what I mean? He didn't plan to have psychotic maniacs sticking needles in his groin, you know what I mean? Or prostitutes sticking needles in his neck. You know, he didn't plan any of that. And when all that came to, I couldn't believe what happened to me, really. A 15-year-old boy, you know, and I was 30-something then, and that's how I was. And it got worse. You know, it got worse than that. Went back to prison. I started inviting dangerous people into my home. You know what I mean? People you meet in prison, you know, you say to them, like, we'll swap addresses, you know what I mean? And give me a ring when you get out, and they fucking did give me a ring. Do you know what I mean? And I'm a bloke from Elm Park in Hornchurch, and I didn't mix with gangsters, and I kept myself very low profile. I wasn't into violence, and you know, I was too timid for all that, you know. And I had this crazy American turn up on my door. I'd invited him round in prison, you know, and that nearly led to me being done for manslaughter. You know what I mean? I couldn't fucking believe it. What's going on here? You know? Inviting people like that into my home, you know, where my wife and daughter lived, you know. The last couple of years of my using was a lot of shoplifting. That's how grandiose it got for me. A lot of shoplifting to get my money together to pay the doctor, and then selling some of the drugs to pay for the chemist. You know what I mean? It's all pretty simple stuff. And it was a real treadmill. And the drugs would be gone within a day, you know, and then I'd have a couple of weeks on the verge of being sick all the time. I might get a few Valium, I might get a drop of Linctus off someone. I might drink a drop of vodka, you know what I mean? But a lot of the time I spent on my own, in the box room, in the flat we were squatting in Barking. Just too terrified to come out, too frightened to come out and mix with the family, let alone go out the door and go to a chemist or go to a dealer, you know. I spent many days sick because I just couldn't get up and go out and do it anymore. I couldn't fucking do it anymore, you know. And 1986 things started changing for me. And I was thinking of it earlier, you know, Live Aid was on in 1986. I think it was 1986, and I remember the day it was on, and I couldn't come out of my box room. We had a video at the time. We had many videos because they used to come and go. You know, they were like drug tokens, videos, anything like that. But we had a video, and my wife taped it for me. I couldn't come out of the box room and watch this event. You know, it was another problem of mine. I never wanted to be involved with anything. I never wanted to be a part of something. And I remember I came out late that night when everyone had gone to bed to watch Bob Dylan, or to be Bob Dylan fan, you know what I mean? And that's what my life was like. I crept out. I was like a little furry animal. I'd creep out at night. And I would actually take bottles, milk bottles, into the bedroom and piss in them during the day, rather than come out and confront people, you know, be forced to communicate with people, you know. That's what I did, and I'd empty them at night. Somewhere along the line I got nicked again, and I got probation, and that's really the turning point in my life where I started talking to someone, you know, because it had gone. I'd started crying on tube trains and crying in the toilet, you know, trying to get a hit, and I'd be, you know, not getting the hit, and for me there was only one way to use it. I wasn't going to drink it, you know what I mean? I'd sit there and I think, what's it come to? And I'd be crying, you know what I mean? I could hear my daughter and wife outside, you know what I mean? And I could, it's like, it was like having a nervous breakdown, because I never knew when I was going to go, you know what I mean? Doctor's surgeries and probation officers, and police, being confronted by the police, you know, getting interviewed by the police, especially if somebody was kind to me. So a policeman rather, only had to say to me, what's going on, man? Look at the state, yeah. And I would be gone. I'm not telling him anything. I would. I did it. That bit of care, you know what I mean? I wanted that bit of care, you know. And I was a liability to know, I'll tell you. But I got this probation officer, and I was going in there and sitting down and talking. And for years I'd had probation officers, and I'd gone in and rushed out, you know what I mean? Everything's okay. And this time I chose, well, I was incapable of denying it anymore. I chose, or I had no choice in saying what it was like. And what it was like was I'd break down and cry. And I was so fucking desperate. You know, the family be at home down the road, and I'd be sitting there with this woman, and I knew what the situation was at home, you know. And I knew what I was going back to, and I knew what my daily life was, and I couldn't lie about it anymore. And I told her, and she suggested I go into hospital and try and stop using drugs, which was the first time in my life that, you know, some people suggested it before, but I'd dismissed it. And this was the first time somebody suggested it, and I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do, you know, that's what I want to do. And whether I believed I was capable of doing it or it was possible is another matter, you know. But just to cut it a bit short, we arranged a place in hospital, a detox centre, in a mental hospital. And I went there, and the first thing they did was sent me to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. And I mean, I thank God they did. I thank God that place was into that, you know, because a lot of places ain't. And I went to my first meeting, and a guy was sitting there doing what I'm doing now, and the last time I seen him was in Pentonville. And I thought, geez, what's going on here? He was 2.5 years clean. I thought, no, not him. Because he was so much worse than me, you know what I mean? I thought, no. And he was clean, you know what I mean? And I remember leaving him in prison, saying goodbye, and I give him my, what did I have? I give him a pair of white front underpants, a bit of tobacco, and some skins, and a big embrace, which were quite rare in this prison, you know what I mean? And I handed them to him through his cell door, And he was sick. He just come, he was fucking sick. You know what I mean? I thought, you poor sod. And I went out and used, and within a week I was the same. You know what I mean? But it was a real tonic to see him. I was sick when I see him, and I walked out of that meeting, and it was like walking on rubber. I was bouncing along, you know what I mean? Bouncing along, and I thought, I want to be clean. I want to rebuild my life. And this looks like a way I can do it, you know. I've had problems, you know, since that first meeting. Like I say, I have a problem with, or I had a problem with joining any organisation. You know, the youth club when I was a kid was the first one. You know, being a part of anything, telling anyone I want to be a part of anything. You know what I mean? So I spent a couple of years in this fellowship, not fully involved. You know what I mean? Not fully. I feel not fully involved, and I didn't get the full benefits out of it. But my life has changed since 1986. My life has changed around completely. I 12-step my wife, and I copped to this. This was 1986. I 12-step my wife, and she's 6 years clean. She's working on 7 years, and I'm working on 5 years. which at the time devastated me. I used again. But there was a real lesson there, you know what I mean? I don't know what it was, but there was a lesson there about me and women and my wife and that. And we've had I've worked in recovery. You know, up until Christmas I worked all the time in recovery. I never gave myself a break. I'm having a bit of a break at the moment. And I'm a good worker, you know what I mean? I'm a really good worker, and people don't want to let me go, you know what I mean? People don't want to lose me because I work twice as hard as anyone else because I'm an addict. And I can get up and go and work, I can pay bills, you know what I mean? My gas meter and the electric meter are intact. They haven't hung off the wall since 1986, you know. We've had no one knocking on the door and searching the house since 1986, you know what I mean? I've had no people in my house that I didn't want since 1986, you know. We've had another baby since 1986, Emily. And she's just a joy of my life, you know what I mean? I spent a lot of time with her recently. And she's beautiful. She's got a new pair of blue Wellingtons. She's had them 3 days, and I don't think she's taken them off. She's a typical addict. They make her feel good, they look good, you know what I mean? So she's not going to let go, you know what I mean? And I know, you know, in my heart, I know that I owe everything I have today to this fellowship, you know. It starts here in these rooms for me. And my greatest joy these days is telling people about recovery, you know. Telling the person that doesn't know that they can get well, you know, because I was one of them people. I didn't know I could get well. I didn't know I could stop using drugs, you know. And people told me, you know. I still didn't believe it, but I came to believe. And I like doing that today, you know what I mean, and seeing people being restored to dignity, and becoming the people maybe they were always meant to become, you know. I feel that's what's happened to me anyway, you know. And I go to meetings, you know, and I enjoy going to meetings, and I go to meetings, and I still go to meetings. I'm working on 5 years clean. I still go to meetings because the people that have stayed clean before me still go to meetings. You know, and they still go into hospitals and prisons and carry this message, you know. And it's a beautiful message. It's a message about reclaiming your life and getting a second chance. Maybe being happier than you've ever been in your life, which is true for me, you know. And I think I'll wrap up there and just say that it's been a real pleasure coming and talking today. Thank you.
That's brilliant.
I'm Mick and I'm an addict. Just to identify myself as an addict, I did use for 20 odd years, and as it says in the text, you know, like my using was about jails and institutions. And the thing is, it feels good doing this chair, it really does, because I feel, forgive me if I'm being egotistical here, but I feel in my own way that I'm kind of like a textbook reference for this in some ways, because the way it was for me before, I was kind of like categorised, you know. I did approved school, Borstal and prison, and you kind of got labelled as a write-off and all that. And today, I'm coming up to 7 years clean, you know, and I'm about to get a degree at one of the best art schools in London, you know, and it's kind of like, to me, that was a dream. You know, it was something that I was always going to do tomorrow, but I used instead, you know, and it's like, it's very easy for me to keep it that simple, how it was and how it is today. And it's not a big miracle pink cloud thing, because it's hard, you know, it was and it is hard. The thing that I would like to talk about is the end of my using, because I was desperate, and I was back in prison once again, and I remember that time very well, you know, and it was in Wormwood Scrubs, and it was the first time I went to NA meeting, and some guy used to come in from outside and used to give cigarettes out, you know, and I used to go for the cigarette. I'm sure people know what I'm talking about. But what I also went for was, I had this feeling that I was a hopeless case. I really had this feeling that whatever there was wouldn't work for me, and I must admit to that. I had given up on myself, and I went into this meeting really hoping that somebody could give me that will to go on and to give me that hope, and I think that is what happened. You know, this guy sat there and he said to me, "It can work for you," and I was moved. I was really moved, because I felt insane. I felt that I was in the middle of a nervous breakdown. You know, it was kind of like I couldn't relate to anything, and I'd been in prison many times, but this time it was kind of like horrendous. You know, I was just scared to face anybody, and all that bravado, all that pretense, all that denial was kind of breaking down, and I just thought it was the end for me, and I thought, you know, what's going to happen to me? And I was scared to talk to, I was actually in a wing in prison, which was, you know, specifically for addicts, and it had group therapy in there and all of that, and yet I felt the way I did, but I couldn't see myself, and I wasn't able to reach out to these people. I just kept looking at them and thinking, I need, but I couldn't get it. There was something in the way, and I went to these groups, and I went to education classes, and I used to go over to the gym, and I was kind of like, it was like a drowning man clutching for a straw, you know, and it was like frightening, because everything I was reaching out to, I'd got into this wing, I'd got on all the courses, the education courses, I was going over to the gym, all these things that are supposed to be positive and make you feel good about yourself when you're not feeling good about yourself, and it wasn't working. You know, I was still feeling hopeless. And I went into this NA meeting in the prison, and it was in a little cell, and there was only 3 of us. There was this guy who came in and 2 others, you know, and I thought, I've got to get in before him. No, I didn't actually think that. What actually happened was, this guy, he spoke for about 15 minutes about himself, and I was waiting to sort of dismiss it in my head. I was waiting for, you know, too much of God, or too much of upstanding citizen, you know, and not enough using, basically. That's what I thought I was going to hear, and I was ready to dismiss him. But as he started talking, I kind of was drawn in more and more, and I thought, yeah, his using wasn't anything like mine. He came from a totally different background, but he communicated his desperation to me, and he also communicated this hope and vitality, you know, that he now had. And so I had this message from him, that he'd been there and he was now here, and that was where I started to get that hope. And he actually said to me, you know, this can work for you, and I needed to hear that. You know, it's sad now. I look back and I think, that's how sad I was, that I needed someone to say, you're worth living, you can do it, it can work for you, because I could not do that for myself. And my best efforts had got me where it got me anyway. And if I'd have gone out of that prison with just my own best efforts, you know, I could have only done what I always did, which was go back to using, and I would have been dead. But what this guy said was, you know, there's lots of people out there clean, you know, and he said a few things that sort of stuck with me, which I've heard a lot around the fellowship, like, you know, you need to stick with the winners, you know. And he said to me, when you come out of prison, you know, he said, if you like, I'll meet you at the gate, take you to a meeting. And as bad as I was and desperate as I was, I said, well, actually, I've got a few things I've got to take care of first. This was the addict in me. Oh, got to keep a bit of slack, a bit of space to get me using him before I do anything serious like cleaning up, you know. And that was still there. And I didn't actually think that, but I automatically said, no, don't meet me at the gate. I'll make my way to a meeting. Well, tell me where it is, and I'll see you there. And he was saying, well, actually, it'd be better if I did meet you, you know. He says, because people have a lot of difficulty when they come out of prison, and it's hard to actually realise it. And he was insisting, and I was insisting, and in the end, he kind of lovingly backed off and said, you know, okay, then I'll see you when I see you. And I came out of prison, and it was 6 weeks later that I actually got to that meeting, and I'd done a lot of damage. Well, no, it's not true. I hadn't done much damage, but I went back using, and I got back right to where I was, and like somehow I just thought, what's happening? I remembered what I'd heard. I remembered how I felt. I remembered that I believed what this guy said, and I believed that it could work for me. And yet, I thought the insanity of this illness, I thought, you know, I could get away with a celebration, and that went on for 6 weeks anyway. But that was the last time I used. 6 weeks after I come out of prison, I'd been drinking, and I'd been drinking really heavily, you know, like buying bottles of wine in the morning and all that kind of stuff. And that was all under my bed and in bags and in the wardrobe bottles, and it was like I was just drinking now, I wasn't using. Do you know what I mean? And that wasn't bad. And but after 6 weeks, I found myself up the West End. I'd got drunk, and I'd gone up there thinking, oh, I want some gear, you know, and I was looking, and I wanted the worst gear I could find, and I wanted to use it in the worst way I could. And I ended up spending 2 hours in the toilet up in the West End, and I ended up sobbing, crying, all of that. But that was the last time that I ever used, you know, and I got myself to a meeting, and it's amazing, 6 weeks later, and I picked a meeting at random. It wasn't a meeting I'd arranged to go to with this guy. And I walked into this meeting in the West End, 1 o'clock, lunchtime, and this guy was sitting there, and he said to me, oh, good to see you, where you been, like, kind of thing. And I thought, I better not tell him, because they might not let me come back, you know. They might say, oh, no, you've been a bad boy, you know, you've used, you can't come. And I sort of made out it was all right. I said I'd been in Ireland, you know, and on business and all that, but I'm back now. And he just said, I'm pleased to see you, and he didn't pull me on it, you know. And I thought, well, this is all right. I can lie as much as I like here, they won't pull me. And I did. I remember feeling that old feeling of shame and guilt. And if anybody had said to me, you're a liar, I'd have gone and never come back. But that's never been said to me in recovery. You know, I could have been stoned out of my head and said I was clean, and they would have said, just keep coming back, yeah, you know. And, you know, this was it. When I was in prison, I used to hear all these stories, you know. I used to do painting in prison, you know, and I used to do these little portraits for people and get tobacco, and it was like currency. And I used to have these big dreams, I want to be an artist and all this, and I always wanted to be something. I wanted to be more than I was, and I certainly didn't want to be a loser, basically, you know, and killing myself, you know. But I don't know, I just wasn't in touch with that, how precious I am. I was never in touch with that until, you know, I came to NA and cleaned up. And now it's like in prison I can see it's like it's not with bitterness or resentment, and it was, because the system and prison and us and them was really strong in me. It really was, you know. For a long time afterwards I'd come to meetings and I still had that anger that come from the lifestyle, you know, us and them, and fuck, they've got it, I haven't, you know. I was full of it. But you know, now it's kind of like I look back and I think, yeah, I would bet everything I've got that most of the prison officers that knew me and the people that had dealt with me, probation officers and all that, wouldn't have given me a chance in hell on my record. You know, they wouldn't have done. And And here I am today. I'm coming up to 7 years clean, as I say, and I'm just finishing a degree course, and I've got a job, I'm earning a living, I live in a flat, I've got it furnished, I drive a car. Now for me this is something else, you know, and we can only judge it by our own standards. You know, it's like we all come from different places, different backgrounds, and it's all relative as far as I'm concerned. It's all relative. And the things that were important was the way I felt, you know, and I've identified that, well, I can't say everybody, but a lot of people in this fellowship have communicated that to me as well. And that same preciousness about life today, you know, that kind of changing that around from feeling not worth living to actually life is wonderful. And I feel I have to say it every time I say that it's not easy. That doesn't mean it's easy, because it is hard. And I struggle a lot of the time. But, you know, my life is rich today, and that's the background I come from, you know. It's like, there were other things. I got married, you know, and I had a son, but I was an absent father and an absent husband, because I was virtually married to drugs and the lifestyle I wasn't available for anybody else. I wasn't available for myself or anybody else. I was in the grip of this addiction, and it was truly the centre of my whole life. And, you know, as time's gone on, I've been able to accept more and more. And it seems to work that as I've got stronger and as I've got more acceptance, as I'm growing spiritually, I'm given a little bit more, you know, kind of like, it's almost like a spiritual responsibility. Like, you're a bit stronger now, you can take on a little bit more responsibility. And that was something I never really ever wanted. I don't want to go on too long, but I've been grateful, and I've heard other speakers say, you know, the way I did it was that I had to get willing, and I had to get out of the way, because my ego is quite big. As bad as I thought I was something, you know, and I thought I was going to be something. It was like the insanity of being two things at once, you know, God and nothing. You know, that is a common thing, and I hear that a lot in these rooms, you know, and yeah, I've come from that, and I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, one of the things was the gratitude. You know, I got a sponsor, and I did a bit of service, which is things I heard, and that was where I had to get the ego out of the way and the willingness, you know, to do a bit. And one of the first things I wanted to do was to go back into prison, funny enough. It just seemed natural. I thought, I've got to go back there and say, look, I'm clean. and in the beginning it was with, I must admit, a little bit of, you know, sarcasm, you know. It was kind of like a little bit of that. I wanted to see those officers' faces as I came in and went out, and have them look at me and think, he's a wrong one, you know, and nothing they can do about it. Nothing they can do about it. And, but that changed, and I had respect for them as well, I've got to say. You know, they're men doing a job. I know the system and society has got a lot of faults, but there's a lot of people in it trying to do the best they can. And I got to like that respect that I got. When I got in there, they'd say, oh, good evening, you come for the NA meeting, like, follow me, you know, how's it going and all that, and then they'd let me go and they'd see you next week, and I loved that, you know, and I felt proud that I could be representing NA, going into an institution like that, and as an example, a personal example of how it can work, you know, and that to me is fantastic. And I think I'll end it there on that grateful note.
Thanks a lot, Nick.
Yeah, my name's Jonathan and I'm an addict.
Hi, Jonathan.
First things first, I think I need to say that I owe my life to this fellowship. If NA hadn't found me in a psychiatric hospital almost 7 years to the day, I know today that I'd be dead. It was the last hospitalisation for me, God willing the last, in a long line of rock bottoms, craziness, insanity, sadness, desperation. But this time I was told, without any doubt at all, that if I carried on living the way I had been, I wasn't going to make it. It was the end of the road for me. I was actually sectioned in this particular psychiatric hospital, although I was medically very ill as well. My pancreas had gone, my stomach lining had been stripped away, my kidneys had almost failed, I had a cirrhotic liver, heart palpitations, I was bleeding every time I went to the lavatory, and I could hardly stand up and I couldn't see. I was also very bloated, I was about 5 stone overweight, and was in a very, very sick condition. And it had never occurred to me that at the centre of what was wrong with me, at the centre of what ailed me, was my drug using. It seemed to me that my life was in a mess, and that what I needed to do to get through the day, to get through it, was to use drugs. It never occurred to me that the reverse was true, that my life was in a mess because I used drugs. What had happened was, age 44, I'd run out of road. I'd picked up my drugs the first time when I was 14. I'd stolen some of my mother's amphetamines, and I used to nick her sherry, and I used to get high quietly on my own. What occurred to me at that time was that when I felt bad about who I was, what I needed to do was to medicate myself. And it worked. At the age of 14 it worked. I felt terrific when I was high. And it seemed to me that that was the way to run my life, so that's the way I ran my life. So when I needed to look at what was wrong with me, what ailed me, I had to turn everything inside out and upside down. And I didn't know how to do it. I had absolutely no idea how to start stopping. I'd never really tried. What I used to do was to postpone using for as long as possible, a day, maybe 2 days, in order to get some kind of relief in some sort of. But I could never stay stopped. And until I met somebody from NA who came to that particular hospital to carry the message of this fellowship to me, I'd never met anybody who used like me who was able to stop. And what happened was that in absolute desperation, I looked to the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous for help. And I'd never in my life asked for help before and meant it. I often used to come to you if you were a doctor and say I need help. What I wanted from you was drugs. I would often ask people if they could help me. What I wanted was money. I would say to you if you were a woman, would you help me? What I wanted was you as a woman. I didn't want help. I never wanted help. I'd grown up as somebody who just knew that life was a lonely business. But what I needed to do was to do it alone. And what NA taught me was completely different. One of the first things that I heard, that I remembered hearing, that is, was this phrase, I alone can do it, but I cannot do it alone. I had to make the decision to clean up, but there was no way I could clean up on my own. And it never occurred to me that I needed something else in my life to stay clean. It always seemed to me that if I couldn't do it, I was never going to be able to do it. So what's the point? In fact, my whole motto when I was using was, what's the point and where's the drugs? And I began to hear people in the fellowship who would come to this hospital. I was there for a long time. And they would tell the stories of their lives and how they cleaned up. And slowly but surely I began to realize that there was a way out of this hellhole that I was in. There was a way through. There was a way home. Not because I felt that suddenly I was stronger, but because suddenly I found that I was part of something much bigger than myself, and that was a whole fellowship of people who were doing the same stuff. And what's more, they used to use like me, and above all else, they felt like I felt. I had never heard anybody talk about that inner loneliness that goes with addiction. I'd never heard anybody talk about addiction as being a disease, which was threefold: physical, mental and emotional, and spiritual. Now, I'm the kid who used to go around in the 50s and 60s saying, I have a soul sickness. I have a yearning. There's something going on inside me, and it's to do with emptiness. It's to do with solitariness. It's to do with cut-offness. It's to do with sadness. And that was what I used to use on. And that's what I heard in NA. People who came from that same space of loss without knowing what I'd lost. And what I was looking for in drugs and everything that went with drugs was some kind of meaning to my life. And although it made me feel like there was meaning in my life, what it did was to rob me of everything that had any meaning in my life. And people began to talk about that, and people began to get through to me, not so much that their lives were the kind of lives that I wanted today, but because they had come from the same space that I'd come from, and they seemed to be going somewhere. They seemed to have meaning in their life. They were smiling, they were hugging, they were being honest. They kind of like they were actually members of the human race again. And I had long ago given up being a member of the human race. I had pretended to be a part of the human race, but I knew deep down inside that I wasn't the same as everybody else, and that the best thing I could do was to get through it. So that was the atmosphere that surrounded me when NA found me in this particular hospital. After some time, I was beating on at these guys in the hospital to let me out and go to a meeting on the outside, because I'd heard that there were meetings throughout London, and in fact throughout the country, and indeed throughout the world, and I wanted to go to one. And they said, well, no, you're too sick, and anyway, you're sectioned, and blah, 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 and you can't go out, and all the rest of it. And in the end, I persuaded them to let me out to a meeting. But I had to go with a psychiatric nurse. They wouldn't let me out on my own. And the meeting they took me to that night, which is, well, it'd be about, nearly 7 years ago now, was at St Mary's Hospital in Paddington on a Wednesday night, which in those days was a kind of like one of the big central meetings in London. And it was completely insane because it was held in the psychiatric ward. And throughout the meeting, which was a big meeting, I guess 100, 120 people, my memory, but who knows how many, these guys would wander in from the ward in their pajamas, and they'd undress and they'd expose themselves, and they'd behave in a very strange way. And this was my first NA meeting. And I wasn't sure who was from NA and who was on the psychiatric ward. And today I know there's really no difference at all. We're all here because we're not all there, and all that stuff. But it was very confusing. What I'm trying to get across was it wasn't a nice, cosy little hometown meeting. It was a big, raucous, central London, urban, metropolitan meeting full of crazies and addicts. And not the kind of place that I would normally go to. And I arrived there and I sat at the back with a psychiatric nurse who held on to me throughout, which must have caused a few eyebrows to raise. And the important thing for me to say now is that I knew I was in the right place. I just knew I was home. I just knew that I was in a place that was going to heal me. It was full of people talking about the way I felt. It was just amazing. And I only got there because somebody had bothered to come into this hospital and tell me about NA. I would never have gone to NA, I'm sure of that, if I'd been let out of hospital and just told that that was the place for me to go. I would have made every excuse in the book not to go there. And I met the man that night who is today my sponsor, and I met a lot of other people who are today close friends of mine, and some of them are even colleagues of mine. And the last thing that I heard when I left that place was Long John C. leaned over to me and he said, you need never use drugs again. And I wanted to hit him. Because I knew he was right. And I didn't want to hear the message of Narcotics Anonymous. I really didn't want to hear that I had a choice. I wanted to keep the back door open. I wanted a way home. Back to me and to my drug taking. But at the same time, my heart did a flutter, and it wasn't the kind of heart flutter that my drugs used to give to me either. It was a sort of a flutter of hope. There was a sense of, yes, this is possible. This can be done, because I'm not alone with it anymore. There is something bigger than me, which is going to help me to do this. And I hadn't at the time any idea at all, really, of what was on offer in the 12 Steps of Recovery. What I sensed was that it was a community of people who came from the same planet as I came from. And out there, for 30 years before that, I had a sense that I was a lone visitor from an alien planet. I was on my own with this shit. And the best thing I could do was to pretend I was okay. And the best way of pretending I was okay was to invent another person to do my stuff for me. So what you got, if you knew me in those days, was a version of me that I kind of like manufactured. It was very close, but not anything like the same. And that was the person that was wound up and sent out. That was the person that made love to people. That was the person that got married. That was the person that had children. And that was the person who did his best. But Jonathan, my own truth, the person I was born to be, was buried inside the whole business of addiction, behind the drugs, behind the pain, behind the fear, behind the shame, and behind the guilt. And for the first time in my memory, at that meeting, I had a sense that that original spirit that had been crushed over the years could flower again, could come alive again. Now, I don't mean to say that I left that meeting with all those thoughts in my head. You know, I was a very sick man. I could barely stand. I was shaking. I couldn't hold the coffee throughout the meeting. The best that the guy could do was to give me about 1/3 of a paper cup or a plastic cup so that it didn't slop. That's how badly I was shaking. On top of all the other stuff I'd used, I'd had a 13-year benzodiazepine habit, courtesy of the doctors who tried to find out what the hell was wrong with me. And I was in a poor state. But those were the feelings that I had. I had a feeling of possibility, of hope, and all the rest of it. And I determined to keep coming back, and I did. And fairly soon after that, I was released from that place, and I started to come to meetings, and I did everything that was suggested. I did 90 meetings in 90 days. I got a sponsor. I started to work the steps. And I did service. In fact, I was slung into service straight off. I guess some of the guys who I met in those early days could see that I needed to get locked in. And so one of the first things they asked me to do was, I'm a journalist and a publisher by profession, was to start up a new magazine. To launch at the World Convention. We had the World Convention in August 1986 in London, and they gave me this job, along with a lot of other people, of starting this magazine up. And God knows how we got the first issue out. I mean, it was about as unmanageable as you can get, but we managed it. And it got me to the convention. And I was sat terrified behind a pile of these magazines at this convention, convinced that the 3,000 or 2,000 or however many people there were there, it felt like about 1 million, were all shooting around, they were all high on something. I wanted to know where the drugs were, because they were running around, all these Americans, and people were charging around and hugging and saying hi, and they were, you know, and stuff, and I just wanted to know where the drugs were, because this is how people behaved when there were drugs, you know. And it pretty soon it was very clear to me that this was just recovery in action. And I went to one or two of the smaller meetings. I couldn't really handle the big meetings. And one of them, interestingly enough, was a traditions meeting, and there was tradition following. And it was in that meeting that I surrendered to this fellowship and to the principles behind it. When it was discussed and pointed out that the only purpose of a meeting is to help the addict who still suffers, I suddenly knew I was in the right place. Now, I've no idea why that particular idea hit me so powerfully, but it did. that the only purpose of this fellowship is to carry the message, and that I get well when I carry the message is how it works. I don't come to meetings and wait to be healed. I'm an addict, right? And what I've done all my life is wait for other people to make me feel better. Right? So I was coming to meetings for the first 3 months, sitting there and waiting to get better. And I used to hear things like, well, this fellowship's a bit like the barbers. If you sit around long enough, you get a haircut and all this kind of stuff. And it never occurred to me that what was expected of me was to put something in order to get what I needed. And I shall never forget, at the very first meeting, I was asked to do a share. I was talking about my life, and just as fit as I am now, only much shakier because I was new around. And afterwards, this guy came up, and he was in the same psychiatric hospital that I'd been in, and he'd also been let out to this meeting. I didn't know, and he said, what you said really helped. And I really begin to understand now where I've come from. And I still know this guy today, and it was his second meeting. And I suddenly felt healed by what he'd said to me. What he'd said was, you know, what you said helped me. And when he said that to me, I started to heal. And I suddenly understood what happens. What is the mystery? What is the spirit? What is the secret? What is the ingredient in Narcotics Anonymous that heals us? And what it is for me is speaking from my truth, talking about my addiction and my recovery, and carrying the message of recovery to somebody else. That's what heals me. So that's what I've done. As it happens, I got involved with helping people in institutions, in prisons and in hospitals to recover from addiction. Not in NA, but in a professional context. And I still work on the same principles as I did when I was an addict very often. And if a thing's worth doing, it's worth doing to excess is one of them. You know. And you've got to have some crazy people around who want to do this kind of work. And that it heals me. And it heals me. Giving something back is what heals me. My life as a result of coming to NA and staying clean a day at a time with the help of this fellowship has turned around 180 degrees. I'm not only not dying today, but I haven't been to see the doctor for any reason whatsoever for about 2 years. In fact, we popped in yesterday, my little boy and I popped in to say hello to him because we haven't seen him for so long. We were passing the house and we nipped in to say hello. I have remarried in recovery, and I have a little boy called Thomas, he's 5. And I have 2 other children, Michael, who's 12, and my eldest daughter Daisy, she's 14. And we're close today, and we have loving and fulfilling time together, and it wasn't like that before. I don't know what else to say really, except that I've just come home. I am the person that I suspect, that I know that I was destined to be. And the person that I lost when I was using. And life is full today. And I wouldn't swap the way I feel now for anything in the world. And it's all due to the crazy lady who came visiting that hospital with her 2 dogs, and who carried the message of Narcotics Anonymous to me and to the others there. Thanks very much.
My name's Kim and I'm an addict. Yeah, it's really nice to be here. Yeah, my experience really, the end result of my using, my real heavy active using, the end result of that was standing in the Old Bailey and getting a 4-year prison sentence, and I looked. I'm quite a tall person, and I was very, very underweight at that point. I looked awful. I know I looked awful because I quite recently saw the photograph that was taken of me when I went into Holloway. And I looked absolutely awful, and I had track marks from basically head to foot. And I stood in the Old Bailey and got this 4-year prison sentence, and thought that I was all right. I thought that I was safe, and you know, that I had things under control, and you know, and I had this bit of bird, and I would do it, and I would get out, and I would just use again. Because up until that point, like I hear in the readings, you know, my whole life was centred around the use of drugs and finding ways and means to get more. The journey to me going to prison was horrific. Sometimes I still, you know, I mean, I think, you know, for me to be sitting here and actually doing what I'm doing today, I really do believe that it's a miracle. The journey to get clean was horrific. You know, I did lots of things that I said I would never do. It's a real progression. You know, I would get into things that I really didn't want to do, you know, and things that I would say, oh, how can so-and-so do this, and fancy doing that, and, you know, and I basically went through the whole lot of it, you know, the stealing, the lying, the manipulating, the prostitution, the robberies, you know, everything, the whole. And I never wanted to do any of that stuff. I really didn't want to do any of that stuff. I don't do any of that stuff today because I have a program in my life, and I found that program by coming to Narcotics Anonymous, and I don't have to have that stuff today. When I went to prison, first, you know, what's become very important to me while I've been clean is that thing about honesty, and I used to really think all the time, you know, when people used to talk about honesty when I first came to meetings, I used to think honesty was sort of about not stealing things off of people and not going and getting arrested and all that stuff. But my time in NA as it's gone on, I've learnt to be honest with myself and just talk about me, you know, because for a long time, for all the time I was using, I just didn't know who I was, and I didn't know what I was about, and gradually I've learnt to find out who I am, and that's been really great, because I spent a lot of time trying to fit in with everyone else and trying to belong, and I never ever thought I belonged, you know, and I can honestly say that since I've been in NA, I do feel for most of the time that I belong. You know, my mind can wander off sometimes, and I can get into that thinking that, oh, I don't belong here, you know, but you know, a big part of me knows that I belong to this fellowship, and I belong, and that's through choice, and I love it, you know, because when I was sitting in a prison cell, you know, and you know what it's like when we're in prison, you know, I would sit there and I'd have to keep up all those fronts and stuff, and I don't know, I'm sure people that are going to be listening to this will really know what I mean, but, you know, I would say things like, you know, oh, I've never fixed in front of my kids, and I, you know, the reality was I had, and I would say that, oh yeah, I'd never go with men for money, and I had, but I couldn't say that, you know, I couldn't be honest. It was, you know, there was too much shame, and I would be too worried about what people thought about me, And if I wasn't being able to be honest, then that meant I was still not being myself. And since I've been in NA, you know, I've been able to be honest, and I've been able to talk about that stuff that was buried real deep inside me, that I was very ashamed of. And since being around the fellowship, I came to the fellowship 2.5 years ago, and since being around, I've really my life has completely turned around. You know, I've been in and out of hospitals, I'd been in and out of institutions, and I'd been in and out of prison all my life. You know, it started off with sort of going into children's homes, going into lock-up units, going into lock-up wards. You know, I was just so insane when I was out there. And since I've come into Narcotics Anonymous, my life has literally turned around, you know, and I'm very fortunate. When I was doing the last prison sentence, I went to my first Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and I went there purely and simply to get out of my cell and to take the mickey out of the people that had come in, really, because I couldn't be myself. I spent a lot of my time just, you know, taking the mickey out of other people and you know, talking about them, because I didn't want to talk about me, and I didn't want to think about me and what was going on for me. You know, and when I went to my first meeting in prison, I thought, you know, these people are not addicts. These two women are not addicts. They're not, you know, they was talking.
I'm Manny and I'm an addict. And I know I'm an addict. I was out there for a long time, and I started taking drugs, I suppose, in comparison to a lot of people quite late in life. I used dope and I used LSD and all that sort of stuff. In my mind's eye, that wasn't serious, you know, and later on, and I was in my early 20s. I remember my first line of cocaine was when I was 22 years old and my daughter was 11 months old. I remember the time, I remember where I was, I remember how I felt, and that was it. That was going to change my life, because that made me feel exactly how I wanted to feel, and I felt fantastic. And so it progressed on until I was 35 years old, and I went through the usual path of devastation and destruction, of having a fantastic, what I thought was a great time in the early days of using. And, you know, I suppose if you looked at me and with my life at that time, I sort of had money, I had a business, I had a house and jetting off here, there, and there, you know, sounds grandiose. And I ended up with nothing and a junkie virtually on the streets. I mean, I did have a flat. I'd moved into hotels with my 2 children. You know, being homeless twice, because even if I had the money, you know, the priority was to get the drugs, and I couldn't be bothered, or it was too late in the day, or by the time I surfaced from being in a coma to pay bills, you know, I'd lost everything. And, you know, there's only a certain amount of time that one can sort of do that thing in your life, because, you know, I always thought, well, it's never going to happen to me. It only happens to other people. They could never chuck me out, you know, I didn't pay my mortgage, or I didn't pay my rent, or this, that and the other. I was given 2 flats, lost them both, because I don't even know if I had the money or not. As I said at that time, you know, it was just that I was too untogether to pay bills, and I never thought it would happen to me. Anyway, this went on for years, and I was a street junkie. You know, I always thought that I wasn't, that everybody else was, but I wasn't. And, you know, it was just horrific, really. I didn't care in the end whether I lived, whether I died, as long as I had gear and was in a coma most of the time, really. You know, that's all I knew at the end. I just wanted to be comatose. I could not face a day, really, without being, you know, in that state. And over the years, I tried to come off because I was taking heroin and cocaine together most of the time. And I tried to come off many, many, many times, and I've used every method known to man, I think. It was 1985 when I came round, and I think, in that day and age, I had tried every method of coming off drugs and staying clean, and it was impossible. I was given a sleep cure, I was given this cure, I was under every DDU that you could think of. In fact, I was at my doctor's only the other day, because I'll tell you about recovery in a minute. I'm buying a house, which is just unbelievable, and I've had to go through my medical history and all my letters from all the DDUs, all the psychiatrists, all this one, that one, are there, and I thought, oh my God, And it was really fascinating, although I found it quite upsetting in a way, going through all this stuff, But there it was, and I was classed as a hopeless case, completely hopeless, by the Home Office, and I was also told by some psychiatrists that I was too old for help. So that was it, that was my life. I was going to be a heroin addict for the rest of my life, and that was very short. By the time I came into recovery, I literally had days to live. It's not being dramatic. I had septicemia. I read that again on my notes. I had septicemia from, injecting, and those are things that I vowed I'd never do. And sores, and it was just horrific, really. And I was just on the way out. As I said, I didn't care anymore. I'd lost it. When I was much younger, I always thought I was a winner in life. And over the years of using, when things turned on me really badly, I was a loser. And I hated the thought of being a loser. But I knew it. I just, I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't stop. I could not stop. And I'd been through loads of things. I'd done things that I vowed I'd never do. I stole, I slept with men, just to get gear, money, anything. That was my life. I didn't know any different then. I did not know that things could be different. To me, that was normal by then. It was really strange that when I came into recovery and people started to point out things to me that I was doing while I was using, it took me a long, long time to come to terms with that. I couldn't understand. We talk about being insane, while we're using. But I didn't feel insane because I was so used to being insane, if you know what I mean, while I was using, that it was so normal that everybody else was insane, that was my life. Just before I came into recovery, I had a gun at my head and a machete knife at my finger, so I had a ring on and I had a loaded Charlie to sell. And I was being ripped off, but that was normal because that was my life. I was dealing, I was using, and that was quite normal, but when I actually did come round and come out the cloud and started to look at my life and what I was doing, then, that's not the workings of a normal human being. It was very scary, it was very frightening for me to come into recovery. I was always petrified about withdrawing. I found it really difficult. I always went through a really physical, very badly physical withdrawal, and I always felt I had to keep myself together because I had 2 kids, and just have this hit and then I'll stop. I just have this hit and then I'll just get them to school and then I'll stop, all that business. And it was really fear, absolute sheer fear. But that's on hindsight, because I was out there, because I was dealing, I was not, fear couldn't come into my vocabulary. I couldn't think about being frightened. I was shitting myself most of the time. But, using the drugs masked all that. I had to. So it just perpetuated it. I took more and more and more and got myself into further and further into trouble. As I say, I came into recovery in 1985, and I was a complete wreck, and I had nothing, and I was I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I wanted to be clean, if I didn't want to be clean. I didn't know how I was going to face life. I was divorced, or I chose to go through a divorce because I was married to a using addict who was a complete lunatic. And I had 2 children. I went away to the West Country for 6 months, got clean, and learned about the program and started going to Narcotics Anonymous and going to meetings. And I made a decision that, you know, this is what I wanted. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know what it was going to be like. And I just thought, right, just get to meetings and get recovery, and, you know, things will sort themselves out. Because having that time away and just learning about recovery and getting some sense of myself back gave me the strength to carry on and do something. I just put my head down. I didn't think too much in those early days. I think if I thought too much about, oh my God, what it was going to be like, you know, really, or allowed too many feelings to come up at that stage, I possibly could have used, because I always used on overwhelming feelings, and it was very overwhelming for me at that particular time. And all I knew to do was to get to meetings, speak to people, do the program to the best of my ability. I was willing, absolutely willing. By this time I started to feel better. This is 6 months into recovery now. And I knew that I wanted it, you know, and that I was going to give it a go. And then I came back to London, and I came back to a flat that had no gas, no electricity, no job, maggots all over the floor from when I was using that doubled in size probably, and 2 kids. And no phone. And I just got on with it, really. And again, what I did, I just went to meetings here, I shared with people, and, you know, we get what we need at that particular time, and I got what I needed every single time. You know, I didn't have any furniture. My parents bought me a settee. They haven't got any money. They lost all their money, but somehow or another, they managed to get it together. You know, they could see that I was trying to do something. They got me a settee. I got the gas on, I got the electricity on, I got myself sort of a little job. I was moonlighting. I didn't feel very good about it, but I had to do it. I just did what I had to do to get myself going. I had the kids, I had a lunatic ex-husband on my trail, right, as well. And I knew I didn't want to be with him, because I knew I was in with no chance. It was like I had to change my life, and that's what I wanted. And it was all, you know, not easy, especially, you know, I think about it now, I smile now, you know, I just did it, and I got on with it. And like over the years of just doing those sort of things, you know, my life has changed around completely. As I said at the beginning of this, you know, I feel really fortunate, but I've worked hard in my recovery. I've worked hard in the respect that, you know, I've got back my life. I have some sense of, you know, a spiritual well-being. I feel joy in my life, and I've worked programs again to the best of my ability, and I have a sponsor. And one thing I always did right from the beginning was service in the fellowship, you know, and that sort of kept me around people and doing things and being involved. And I go into prisons, and I take meetings there, and all that sort of stuff, you know. That sounds like a do-gooder or a Samaritan, and it's nothing like that. It's because I want to give back some of the stuff that, you know, that, but for the grace of God, you know, how I never got in. I've been in the cells and all that business. How I never got into prison, God knows, but I mean, I didn't, you know. But for the grace of God all the way through, because I'm an addict, I was a using addict, I was a dealer, I was out on the streets, and that was my life. And everybody knows the chaos and the madness that goes on in that life. And now it's different, you know, and I've got, you know, as I said, I feel really fortunate, but I've worked for it. My kids are fantastic. They're really, really well. They were so damaged by the using, so damaged. and so neglected, and I did the best that I could while I was using, but I mean, you know, it was just like a nightmare, the whole family, and I've had to do a lot of work. I say work, you know, with outside even help, like with therapists, around the shame and the guilt that I've had around my children, you know, the terrible upset and devastation I caused them, you know, and you don't realise that. I didn't realise what I was doing. I had no idea that, you know, I always thought I hid it from them. And it was just impossible. I mean, you know, if you're an addict, you know what your life is like and what happens, and the denial around it while I was using was just unbelievable, you know, and again, this is all looking back. And so they're fantastic. Now, you know, I went through, my daughter became anorexic while I was in recovery a few years ago. She nearly died. And, you know, I thought, the first thing I thought, well, what chance does that kid have? What chance the hell did she have? You know, she wanted to die, really. And it was only because I'd been coming to meetings and I knew about programs was able to help her as well. And she'd been around recovery, and sort of things happen. It just gets in your skin, it gets in your, you know, everything, your psyche, everything. And she is well now, you know. I mean, normally with something like that, they have a dial that goes on for years and years and years, and it's only because, you know, being in the fellowship, and also, I mean, I could have used during that time because it was absolutely devastating, and it went on for a year, and I went to bed every night and I'd lost hope because I couldn't see any change at all, and I lost a bit of faith at that time as well. And it was only the people in the fellowship that really carried me at that time and got me through. I was able to get vulnerable and cry and scream, and what am I going to do? Some days I didn't want to go home, I felt guilty, I felt sad, I felt it was my fault, it was this, you know, and it was their support that got me through it, and I didn't use. Because I knew really deep down inside that if I used, it's not the answer, because what was it going to be? I was going to go back to that old life that I didn't want. And it's not the answer. I want to go forward all the time. And so, you know, all is well there. And I met a guy who's also in recovery, and he's in the fellowship, and we're buying a house together, and we're going to be living together. I've known him for a long time, and we've not done that yet, and all these changes, and it's just, you know, amazing. And I have a, you know, a nice job, and, you know, I realised at some stage when I got clean, the world is now my oyster again. I can have basically what I want if I work for it. Nothing comes for nothing. Because when I was using, that was my philosophy. Somehow or another, you know, it all came to me. At one time it did anyway, it didn't at the end. But, you know, I lived in that dream world of, I don't know, of it was all going to happen. And I was going to be, I don't know. I think about when I, you know, during that time, and it's another life. It's another life. It's very sad, and it's very empty, and it's something I never want to go back there again. I never forget it, and I'm really pleased in a way that I have been an addict, because I wouldn't be the person that I am now, I don't think, without it, because it's given me something else in life that us addicts have, and we share with each other, and, you know, we can get on with people in life, and of all walks of life now, I can, and it has given me another edge, because I've been to the edge and I've been back. I've been close to death, or I've overdosed and come back, and it's great to be alive, and it's great to be a recovering addict, and they gave me back my life. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I'm Robert, I'm an addict.
Hi, Robert.
Yeah, it's nice to be here, and it's nice to be given an opportunity. I mean, I have a lot of things in my life, but I think the most important thing that's in my life is to carry this message to the addict who still suffers.
And it's that simple. And that might, where you're sitting, seem like, you know, you can have a chuckle and a laugh, and that's fine. You know, I simply will try to the best of my abilities to be honest and to sow a seed, because that's what happened for me, and that seed originally, you know, it just grew. And eventually one day I realized that beyond belief I could get clean and I could stay clean, and to my belief there is no reason why I need to ever use a drug or a drink ever again in my life, a day at a time. And that is the most remarkable thing that I have ever experienced in my life. Where I come from, I was born in a road called Bowmore Road in Notting Down, London West 11. It was poor, deprived, ugly, dirty and violent. And I grew up in that world and it stunk. And I didn't like it. And I didn't want to be part of that world. And from a very early age, as so many people and so many speakers will constantly say, they found fantasy. And basically, you know, it's one of the things that most of us seem to discover very early on, that you can withdraw into your own head and you can be anyone you want to be and you can be any place you want to be. And I found that out really early. And I just used to sit and stare. And it helped me not to see the guys, the 40 to 50 guys I used to walk past being deloused on my way to school. It helped me not to have to look at the endless sort of rounds of bread and dripping that I used to eat, or watch my father come home after working a 12-hour day on a push bike, you know, or my mother going out charring, cleaning people's houses to keep us with some form of beef burgers on the plate. Oh, that's okay today. I have no problem with any of that stuff. But basically that was it. It was fantasy. When I was about 9, the formative years of my life were spent running around on debris, climbing over barbed wire fences and being chased by caretakers and the police. And it was fun. It was a buzz. I used to enjoy it. You know? And you know, when I was about 9, one of us got up the bottle to go into the local off licence. We used to buy the flagons of cider. We used to go, it used to be called Latimer Road in those days. It's now, they've renamed the name, it's now called Preston Road. And we used to sit in Latimer Road in the back of burnt out cars and drink these flagons of cider. And it used to make us feel all right, you know. And it was fine. And that was my sort of first experience, was the cider. Then I used to go in the pubs, you know. I used to go into the villains pubs and I used to mark up the dart games for the boys because I was good at arithmetic, and they used to buy me pints of brown ale. And I used to drink these pints of brown ale, and then I used to walk out of those pubs and I used to throw it up in the street. But I used to go back. Didn't bother me in the least. Didn't bother me in the least. You know, and when I was 12 years of age, I picked up my grandmother's Tunal prescription. And I didn't know anything about pills or tablets or anything else, but they looked good. So I took a handful out, you know. And I gave them to all our friends. And the highlight of our working class week was that on a Sunday, we used to go to the cinema, and it used to be the Shepherd's Bush Odeon. And we used to go to the Odeon and watch the film. And basically I handed out all these Tunals to my friends. And we were woken up by the cleaners, you know. And when I got home, the doorbell started ringing. And there was all these fathers and mothers asking what was wrong with their children, why they were asleep underneath the kitchen table, why they were crashed out on the sofa. And Robert got a bit of a reputation, you know. So I thought, well, you got a reputation, Robert, let's live up to it, you know. And that's what I did. By the age of 14, I had my first fix. It was methadone. I had it behind the old TA barracks. It was nice, and I got arrested. Down to Notting Hill Nick. Story of my life, really. Kept on going to Notting Hill Nick. Do you know Notting Hill now, boys? It was all right, you know, and it was the sort of 60s, and it was the hippie culture, and yeah, there were things like IT and Oz, and lots of people were glorifying the benefits of drugs, and this was the way we were going to change the world. And I believed them. I got sold a bum deal, I'll tell you that. I believed them. You see, all my life I wanted one thing, and that was that I wanted to change the world. I really wanted to change the world. I didn't like the world. I didn't like the values. I didn't like the unfairness of the world. And I honestly believed that drugs would enable me to be able to change the world, to make it a little bit better place. So I tried. And for the next 20 years, I tried very, very hard to do that. And I tried everything. I was a pig. As far as taking drugs, if you had given me the Pacific Ocean filled with cocaine and the Atlantic Ocean filled with heroin, it would not have been enough. I would have used it, or I've died attempting to use it. Whatever I took, I just couldn't stop. And that to me is an addict. It's basically, I grew up with a lot of people who use drugs, and they used to be able to go to school, they used to go to work, they used to go to college. From the moment I started using, I could not stop. I liked it so much, I wanted more, and I wanted more, and I wanted more. And as soon as I used to open my eyes in the morning, I wanted to be stoned. That's all I was interested in. I didn't give a damn about anything else. I simply wanted to be stoned. That was my life. I lived to use and I used to live. And you know, as the time went on, it got worse. All my values went, my morals went, all the things I told myself I would never do, I did. I watched people die. I watched people get seriously hurt. I watched depravity, and it didn't even affect me. It didn't even faze me, because it was normality, because it was the only thing I knew. I lived in sickness 24 hours of the day, 365 days of the year. I knew nothing else. I lived in total, absolute insanity, and therefore I was insane. And I know I was insane. Basically, I came to a point, and the only way I can describe it is loss of all hope. Loss of hope. For me, I craved the acceptance that I used to have when I was using. Because I accepted very, very simply that I was a junkie, I was a no-hope junkie. I ran out of the list of the names of the doctors who would just say I was incurable, and the psychiatrist who would just prescribe another pill and tell me to keep coming back, you know. But basically, I lost all hope that it could ever, ever be different. I basically just gave up. I just sort of accepted that this is the way it will be, and one day I'm going to die, I'm going to be found in the gutter, and that's it. That's the end of my life, and that's all I deserve, that's all I'm worth, that is it. That is it, end of story. And basically, by a series of miracles, really, nothing to do with me. I heard about the program. And in 1983, I'd just come out of a detox centre. Do you know Ashdown, Bexley Hospital? I'm sure a few of you have been in there. You know? I just come out of a detox in there. And I started going to meetings. I went to my first meeting, rather. And my first meeting was the Hampstead Heroes on a Wednesday night. By this stage, you know, all my fronts had gone down, you know. By this stage, I had holes in my trousers, I had holes in my shoes, and I wasn't adverse to picking up cigarettes off the street, you know. Basically, I'd lost all dignity. I'd lost all self-respect. I'd lost everything that I had. The only thing I had left was my life. And really, I suppose in retrospect, I think of one thing, and that is that many, many times I used to fall down on the street, or I used to take a beating, and I used to just want to stay there, lying on the street. It used to feel so comfortable. And I just didn't want to get up. I just didn't want to get up. I just didn't have the courage to kill myself. I just didn't have that courage. But I wanted to die. Doctor said to me when I was 21, when I went in for my first detox, he said to me, "Robert, you're either a very brave man or you're a very stupid man." He said, because the way that you have chosen to kill yourself is the hardest known to man. And there's a railway station on the other side of the road, and if you want to die, why don't you just go and throw yourself underneath the train? It took me, after he said that to me, 11 more years to actually understand what he was saying. And I went to this first meeting, and I saw a lot of people, and they were well dressed and they were relatively affluent, and the room was just totally packed. They were fighting for seats on the stairs, you know. And they were talking, I mean, they might as well have been talking Russian. You know, I expected them to start doing ballroom dancing or something, you know, the sort of language they were using. It was just like, I couldn't believe it, you know. And I sat there. You know, I mean, I don't remember anything. I remember a few of the faces, and unfortunately most of them aren't. Most of them aren't here anymore. And basically, you know, the only thing I remember from that first meeting is one thing, and it's something that now is engraved on my soul, and that is keep coming back. I took all of those people's inventory. Yeah, they were juniors, yeah. I was sicker than the rest, you know. I was very proud of that. But they told me to keep coming back. And from where I was, basically, if I used to ring on your doorbell, you presumably tried to go down the drain pipe at the back of your house. If you saw me walking down the street, you would turn and run the other way. And I was immensely impressed by that simple message of keep coming back. And so I did. And I sat in the rooms, and I came and sat in the rooms, and I used to sit down at a chair, and people used to get up and walk to the other side of the room. Yeah, but I kept on coming back. Kept on coming back. And I wasn't clean. I was stoned. But I kept on coming back. Because something in me, that one cell of sanity that I had left, told me that this was the way out. This was what I was looking for. And slowly, with the uses of rooms inside the fellowship where people would explain things to me, and I would be able to ask about things, and people very simply just made suggestions. And an amazing series of events happened, and it sort of ran like this. One morning I woke up, and it was a Saturday morning, and I didn't want to use. It was quite amazing, because as soon as I opened my eyes, you know, I wanted to use. And yeah, I mean, I used to dream about what I was going to do when I woke up. You know, what drugs did I have to open my eyes to? And this particular day, I just didn't want to use. And I went to a meeting. I rang someone up, and they said, yeah, put your coat on, walk out the door and come to this meeting. And that's exactly what I did. And I went to the meeting, and it was all very nice and all the rest of it. And I left the meeting. It was in the King's Road, off the King's Road. And I walked along the King's Road, and I was clean. And I hadn't been clean for 20 years, maybe even longer. And the only way I can describe it was I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think, I couldn't talk, and I was totally insane. And that was without drugs. You see, I needed drugs to open my eyes in the morning. I needed drugs to breathe. I needed drugs to speak. I needed drugs to eat, to think. I couldn't function without drugs. And without the drugs, I was insane. So I'm in this incredible situation where when I take the drugs, I'm insane, and when I don't take the drugs, I'm insane. And that's a weird space to be. That is a really weird space to be. So I went to other meetings, and I found a girl in one of those meetings who had been one of my personal slaves. We know about personal slaves, yeah? Right, good. Right? And I've been giving this lady 10 to 12 fixes a day for 5.5 years, and there she was, and she had 3 years clean. And that impressed the life out of me. And then I got taken to another meeting, and that meeting still goes, but at a different venue, and it was called the First and Last Meeting. I went to that meeting, and I sat in that room, and I was sort of sitting there, and a bit of sanity came into my life, and it says, "You've been here before." And I realised that was the room. That building, it was a dot house by the way then, and that was the building where I had my first fix when I was a kid. And there I was all those years later in exactly the same place for exactly the same reason. And the penny dropped. I asked for help, I got the help, and basically, I suppose someone said it to me today, I was a 12-steppers dream, I wanted it, I just didn't know it was possible. And from the moment I made that decision, it was all right. It was all right. I needed help, I had to go in somewhere, and I remember walking down one of those corridors at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and going through this detox. And I found a little book, and I opened this little book, and I saw this word God. Yeah? It's a funny word, that God, isn't it? And I just went, God, help me. I cannot help myself. And I'm still here to this day. And I came out into the program, and basically I was attracted by a few people in this program who kept on showing up. And they made really simple suggestions to me, and I believe in simple suggestions. And they were, don't use, go to meetings and get involved. That's what the suggestions that were made to me. And that is exactly what I did. I now see recovery as almost like a plate. I would choose to stand in the center of the plate and not at the side of it. I don't want to fall off. I cannot afford to fall off of this thing. This thing is my life. I never worked the whole of my life. I'm now a company director. Amazing. I never had a relationship except I got, do you want, give me. You know, that was the idea of my relationship. In August of this year, I will celebrate 6 years marriage. I have 2 divine children, Reese and William, who I love very much. I watched both of them born. Last year, I watched my mother die. I have grown up in this program. It has given me things that I wonder how I managed all those years without them. It's given me faith, it's given me hope, it's given me tolerance, it's given me patience, it's given me dignity, self-respect. The list is endless. You know, I sort of realise now why I went to school. When I went to school, I used to think that, you know, you had to go to school to take your GCSEs and 11 plus and all that. But it wasn't. That wasn't the reason why they sent us to school. It was so when we went and brought a loaf of bread, someone wouldn't rob us when we gave them a quid. And that we could actually paper, and that we could actually write a letter to someone. And that is exactly how I treat the rooms today. This is my classroom. I learn here. I learn an awful lot from people what not to do. And from some people, I learn what to do. And it is that simple. Another thing that I feel that I should mention is that today I am working on a relationship with myself and with the God of my understanding. Not Margaret Thatcher's God, not the Pope's God, my God. And basically my firm belief is that I'm one of God's kids and that I've come home. And that basically I have a right to be happy, I have a right to a decent life, and I also have a right to be free. It is an obscenity to the human spirit to be addicted to any substance, an obscenity to the human spirit. The human spirit craves freedom. I can go out and use anything I choose to use, but I would do it out of free choice, not because I have to, which is the reason why I always use drugs. I didn't have any choice. Today, I have a choice. And that choice has been given to me by Narcotics Anonymous. 100%. Nothing else. I've never seen a counsellor. I went into a treatment centre. I've never seen a counsellor. I have simply gone to meetings and, to the best of my ability, tried to work the steps. And the other thing I do on a daily basis is I don't kid myself that I run the show. I show up. I heard someone earlier say they show up. I've learned that 90% of life is actually showing up. That's all you have to do, is simply show up. I show up at meetings. I show up at work. I show up at home. And the rest of it just rolls on. Just simply rolls on. Amazing. Thanks.
My name's Harry and I'm a recovering addict. A nervous one. And you have to bear with me because it'll probably take a few minutes to talk the nervousness out of my voice. It's great to be here. When I was asked to come and do this year, I was at a convention of Narcotics Anonymous in Manchester, and basically I'd like to think that I put down anything that I'm doing in order to come and do a share, because it's a very big part of my life, carrying the message, especially to hospitals and institutions, because institutions have been a very big part of my life. I grew up in a family of 10 kids. I have 9 brothers and sisters, and I was number 9 out of 10. And the sort of space that kept me in wasn't a very pleasant one. I always felt like I always had to have the approval of older brothers that were hard, tough guys. My father was alcoholic, and sometimes that was unpleasant. At a very young age, people have talked today about going into fantasy worlds. I started doing that at a young age, through books, and I would sort of just retire to my bedroom and reading sort of J.R. Tolkien stuff and C.S. Lewis and all this sort of thing, and that's how I sort of avoided the pain of my reality. Our family was always immigrating back and forth to America, and so I never really had a chance to settle. And I remember my first experience with drugs was with a bottle of Valium, and I had just sort of had an argument with my dad, and I remembered seeing this bottle of Valium in a friend's toilet. It was his mother's, because she had bad nerves, and like so many families in Glasgow, it was probably due to having an alcoholic spouse or something. And I remember when I seen this bottle of Valium, just having read about Valium and that it was supposed to make you feel nice and relaxing, and tranquilise you. And I remember just registering it and storing the information away for future reference. And I remember having a bust-up with my dad. And this was at about 13 or 14, and I went straight to my friends and grabbed that bottle of Valium and talked him into running away with me. And we both ran away to the east coast of Scotland, and we pitched a tent on the beach, and we were eating these Valiums like sweeties. And in the morning, I woke up in Kirkcaldy Sheriff Court, and that is sort of says a lot about me. Our family went back to America, and just over the years, I got into the club scene. It was drinking, I was smoking dope, and before I knew it, I sort of found opiated prescription medication, you know, for a couple of injuries. I ended up having a broken jaw from getting in a fight, and I was taking, you know, sort of codeine-based stuff, and I loved it. The feeling that I got out of this stuff was great. And as far as a drug of choice goes, I know today that my drug of choice is more, because anything that sort of made me feel good, I wanted more of it. And it could have been pot, you know, grass, cannabis, Valium, opiates, coke, speed, even stuff that I didn't like speed. The insanity of it is that I'd repeatedly do it, and I never had a clue why I was like this. And then I started going in and out of the county jails, and eventually ended up in a correctional institute for young offenders, you know, which is one step below the penitentiary. And I was in there doing a 5-year sentence. I finished that, and straight back out there after having, you know, done a relatively short period of time on that sentence. I was sentenced to a concept drug rehabilitation centre, and I spent less than 24 hours there. And I phoned up the county jail and I said, come and get me, because I'd rather be in the Nick than be in a place like that. And it was a sort of place that made you wear signs around your neck saying that you're an asshole. And that isn't what I needed. You know, they talked about breaking you down and building you back up into a new man of the 80s or whatever. And that just never worked for me, because it was the same stuff that was happening in sort of my family, you know, and a lot of negative messages that I didn't need to hear, you know, that you'll amount to nothing. The sort of things that teachers used to tell me, you know, you're just like your older brothers, and you're no good, and all this sort of thing. And it's like I've been hearing all this stuff for years, and it's like prison officers in America saying, I remember one of them saying, you're doing life on the installment plan. And I really thought I was doing life on the installment plan. And in 1988, I was deported from America. With a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and remorse, leaving my brothers behind in America, not knowing if I would ever see them again. And I returned to my home outside of Glasgow, to where my sisters live and my mother lives. And it was like all my sisters were all trying to fix me and tell me what to do and how I should live my life, and I couldn't handle it. And I left, you know, and I came down to England after about 2 weeks. And all their hearts were in the right place. They wanted to help me. But it was like I had this picture of myself, and it didn't fit in with their scheme of how I was and how I should be, because my fantasy was that I was a gangster. And it's like, while I was banged up in America, my father died. And he died in 1986, and it took me about 5 years to cry over that. because my fronts were up so far that I couldn't get vulnerable in prison, you know, and I couldn't show anybody that I was hurting. And a couple of real close friends of mine died while I was banged up, and I couldn't show any feelings about this. And that's not the sort of person I am, because today in recovery, you know, I cry very easily, and I've been sitting here today and, you know, listening to people sharing, and it brings so much up. And it's really, what this fellowship's gave me is it's gave me permission to be myself and to feel all those feelings, and that is a magnificent freedom. When I came down to England, I started off in Southampton, and I was working, and I was just drinking, and then, you know, not only was I addicted to drugs, but I was addicted to crime. And it wasn't very long before I was thieving and robbing and doing burglaries, and I ended up having to move to Brighton because it was getting too hot in Southampton. And when I was in Brighton, I found the smack scene again, and I ended up getting strung out, and I ended up going on the trot on the continent, not knowing if I could even come back to Britain because there would be a warrant out for my arrest for doing a snatch in a bank. I came back, and I was living in a squat in Golders Green in London, and 4 o'clock in the morning one morning, in came the Hendon mob and carted me out of there, and I ended up in a prison on the south coast for about a year. And I loved prison, you know, and that might sound sick, but I really felt like I belonged in prison, and I enjoyed a lot of the time that I've spent in prison because I thought that I was having the crack with the lads, and we did have a laugh, you know, and I've made a lot of good friends in prisons, and that's why it's so very important for me today to be able to share what I've got to share now, because, you know, I'm sure that some of you guys that will be listening to this I've probably came across, or if you're on your way to court this week, chances are quite good that the sweatbox you're in, I've been in. And I really did think, you know, that I would end up pretty much doing my whole life banged up, a little bit at a time, getting out, and the revolving door, because I had no intention of stopping using. You know, even when I'm in prison, I was totally preoccupied. You know, and it was like I would be going out and going to the office to make governor's applications and to make applications to do this and to do that, just to get out of my cell so that I could be looking for a half-ounce deal or whatever. And it's like I spent most of my time, especially in the London prisons, you know, chasing that, you know, little two-skinner joint or whatever, and it would take up all my energy, you know, throughout the day to sort of, you know, get this poxy little bit of draw or whatever. And that's what I was like. And it's like, you know, I'd get out, I'd get released, and my intentions would be that I'd just go to the pub with my brothers and I'd try to just drink beer. And, you know, once I get to the pub, you know, it would only be an hour or two, and I'd be outside having a spliff with somebody. And then I'd be hungover in the morning, and I'd be having to have a beer in the morning to sort my head out. And before I knew it, it was just, and I'd get up one morning, and the only thing that would sort me out would be a hit. And I had no intention of having any beer when I get out, and that's what it would be like. And then I'd be lying roasting in F-Wing in Brixton, and I'd be, you know, I'd have the red light on in the cell so as not to, you know, disturb my cellmate, and laying there fucking tortured listening to the generator all night and climbing the walls. It was horrible, and the humiliation of having to go into the doctor's office and pull my strides down and get vitamin B jabs in the arse, and it was just horrific. And then, towards the end of my using, I don't know what happened, but a lot of feelings started catching up with me, and I've just been running too fast, too far for too long. And it's like one of my best mates, who's a Londoner, Alan, hung himself. Another really close mate of mine, Mark, OD'd on a filter because he had too much to drink. People were getting murdered in Camden Town that I knew. And I'd be walking down the streets and just fucking bursting into tears. I just couldn't handle it any longer. And somebody reached out to me in this fellowship in NA, and they helped me to get into treatment. And I went through treatment, and I went to any lengths, and I went to another place after that for another 4 months. And I surrendered. You know, I knew that I had to give up the puff, you know, and that was hard for me to get my head around, because I thought, you know, puff doesn't do me any harm, it's just puff. But you know, when I puff, I drink, and when I drink, I get hungover, and when I get hungover, I end up using gear, you know, and then I'm back on the methadone, and I'm swallowing eggs and Valium, and the state that I end up in it's, you know, I don't need it any longer. It doesn't work for me. So I accepted step one, you know, basically, that I am powerless over drugs, and drugs mess my life up to an extent that I can't handle. And since I accepted that, miracles have started to happen in my life that are totally unbelievable. It just seems like, you know, I'm a bit funny about the word God, but it just seems like a lot of graces have just came my way, and a lot of miracles have happened. I haven't taken drugs for about 16 months, and I have my girlfriend has a baby on the way that's due in about a month. I'm in full-time education. The one that was doing life on the instalment plan, I'm going to be going to one of the best universities in Britain in October. I'm very involved with this fellowship, and it's like, you know, I go out walking in the morning, and it's like, you know, man, it just feels like my heart is singing sometimes, you know. It's such a good feeling because I'm free, because, you know, the sort of, I didn't need to be banged up to be in prison, because I could be in Camden Town picking my methadone up every Monday and every Tuesday and every Wednesday at the chemist, and because of that sort of imprisonment, I couldn't even leave the area to go up to see my family in Scotland if I wanted to, you know, and I don't have that, you know. I hitchhike up here today, you know, and I don't have to be back where I live for tomorrow morning to pick up my script, you know, and that's magic, you know. I love that, I treasure that, and I would not trade it back in for nothing. I feel like I've got so much time for this fellowship, and for service, and you know, I involve myself heavily in service, because the same feelings of camaraderie that I got in prison I get in this fellowship, because this fellowship is made up of a lot of people, you know, that have been there, that have been in the prison, the same sort of people that you guys that are listening to are. You know, this is where you belong. I guess probably the one thing that I would like to relay to anybody that is listening is, don't believe the age-old lie, once a junkie, always a junkie, because we can and do recover, and I will leave it there.